Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable. I'm your host, John Maddox, and tonight we're having another stream you just won't want to miss. If you got what it takes, click that link, but prepare yourself, for this arena is not for the weak. Now, let the mental combat begin, but always make sure your arguments are LPP.
What is going on, everyone? Let's leave our mics on mute while I'm getting things kicked off. Hope everybody had a good time over at the debate over on Saying for Truth. Another epic throwdown between Ken Hovind and the latest challenger in this tonight. It was Michael Steele. That interesting conversation on whether or not evolution is reasonable. It was definitely a interesting back and forth, some good dialogue between the two. Great questions. Awesome Q&A from everybody. So appreciate everyone who's jumped over from there. To now, we get to extend the fun, ladies and gentlemen, into the wee hours, potentially. Depends how it all goes. But if you want to jump in and share your thoughts on the debate and just, best one-liners, comebacks, zingers, overall what your thoughts were, make sure you click that link. It is in the side chat. Got it pinned up at the top. So if you want to come on in here, make sure to click that. You don't have to have a camera or anything like that. You just You can do it directly from your phone, so make sure you click that link if you want to get in on the conversation. A bunch of great folks are inside chat. I want to say thanks to all the members who have joined us tonight. Appreciate your support and helping me get all these things going. If you want to become a member, there's a link in there right next to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. But there's a couple different membership options, and appreciate all that. Also, if you want some merch, there is a link to that in the description. And if you use, I think it's code LPP20, and get 20% off any merch if you want to do that. All right, without further ado, we're going to dive into the after show. And for those just the first time, that's how it works. What we do is kind of do round robin. Folks kind of who came first, we'll do it in order, basically. Take maybe minute and a half, and share your thoughts on the debate, and then we'll go to the next person. Then once all that happens, then we'll kind of dive into open mic back and forth discussion. And if new people come in, they get a chance, for 1 to 2 minutes, share their thoughts, and then we'll go back into open mic discussion. So without further ado, Jackson Rowe was the first here. Hopefully he has recovered completely from COVID. Oh, no, that's why he is available to be on the after show tonight. He's still sick and going to get to call in tomorrow. So Jackson, you're up first. Welcome to the stream. Appreciate you joining us. What are your thoughts?
Well, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I mean, I thought it was going to be, it was better than the one with David Neff, I guess. But I thought the opening statement from, what's his name, Matthew, was going all right until he started using the ad hominems. And I was like, oh, great. So, and no one really presented any evidence the whole time. It seems like they were just talking about verbs and nouns, and I mean, there wasn't a lot of evidence being displayed. So that's pretty much my observation. Kent talked about where did all the elements come from and the geologic column again, which are kind of my pet peeves. But anyway, I'll hand it to somebody else now.
All right. I believe Wesley was up next. What's up, Wesley? How you doing? Welcome to the stream. How you been? Good to see you. What are your thoughts on the debate tonight?
Yeah, good to see you, LPP. And I guess my thoughts were, I guess right now I'm still kind of frustrated with the semantic overload of the word evolution. I think that wasn't a very clear way to, base the whole premise of the debate on, because I agree you can just say, like evolution can mean just changes in allele frequencies, or even just like natural processes, natural mechanisms that we can observe. So I agree with Roe also that there wasn't a lot of evidence on either side, and I found Matthew's sort of stream of consciousness kind of hard to listen to in some ways. I guess those are my main thoughts, but I'll pass it over.
All right. Well, appreciate that. And up next, we've got the one and only Irrational Empiricist. What's going on, man? How you doing? Welcome to the stream. What are your thoughts?
Good. Thanks for having me on, John. Basically, well, I didn't catch the entirety of the debate, mostly the end portion of it. I was off somewhere else, but from what I did see, I agree with most of the points from everyone else here on the panel, and I think that, well, I did see some mistakes that I think both parties made, and I think that Matthew, for instance, if he had really focused on the evidence for common descent specifically, maybe he could have made a stronger case and kind of went through with it and shown why Kent's reasoning there was false. I will say that the parts I did see, like the vestigial organs, bacteria not turning into something else, whatever that means, I did have some stuff to say on that, but I guess we'll just see if we do get into that tonight. And I think that's my general thoughts on that.
All right. Well, appreciate the your thoughts there. Yeah, my opinion, it was removing substance and whether right, wrong, whatever from the equation, my personal opinion is it was a bit of a beatdown by Kent, just to be blunt. Now, again, whether or not you want to agree with all of his points, and otherwise, from a like delivery perspective and confidence, eloquence, etc., I think it was a pretty heavy shellacking. But the most, for me, from a like more of a like the formal debate perspective, I agree with you guys that there wasn't really evidence, and I don't know if Matthew like forgot that he was the one kind of with the burden of proof in that whole context, and because it obviously kind of turned into, I mean, even the opening statement kind of turned into like a, well, I don't believe in your God, so whatever. Kind of a, I don't need to actually defend my position because I think you're wrong, and I don't really view that as a very solid way to go about it. But it's each to their own, I guess. And I don't know, it was interesting. What's up, man? How you doing, Slavic? Welcome to the stream. What are your thoughts? Did you get? Well, first off, did you catch the debate? If no, how you doing? And anything you want to add? If yes, what are your thoughts?
I caught a little bit of it. I didn't catch the whole thing. I only noticed it after this after the show popped up on my notification. Like, oh, what's going on? But I did listen a little bit of about vestigial organs too. I was thinking that's an interesting way of. I mean, Kent Hovind usually brings that up about whales specifically, and I was wondering if there's actually any. I mean, they keep bringing it up as those are leg bones, but I have never seen any evidence that they are leg bones. Like they bring it up as like, we believe there are leg bones, but is there actually any evidence of like whale skeletons that have actual legs attached there or not? Because I mean, it'd be pretty easy to dispute that, I would say. But actually, I had a few other thoughts. I don't know. I'll probably whenever we get into that, I'll mention it. I don't have too much time today, but.
John, I think you're on mute, brother.
You're right. And I was over there trash talking you, Donnie. And it was on me. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, somehow Donnie made it to Walmart and back in like 9 minutes or less. And so I think he may have been breaking the law, is all I gotta say from a speeding perspective. But
those are just recommendations, John.
Well, true. Well, given the fact that he lives in Canada and, all rule of law has been tossed out the window as to whatever the, Trudeau or, the other premiers and such are thinking at a given moment. So who knows at this point? The laws are just suggestions based on whoever's in power at the time, I guess, at this point. So anyway, but before we let Donnie talk, because we know he's going to have a download, Slavic, you had said there were a couple other things you wanted to bring up. Did you want to air those before we let Donnie have a meltdown?
Yeah, sure. I was just thinking like, if there's a couple points I was listening to C.S. Lewis, and he kind of was talking about evolution, and he was, I think this is in one of his papers he wrote for a newspaper or newsletter, and he said that there's two things that are kind of going against evolution, and one of them is that before even evolution came into prominence in the science community, it actually became a culture phenomenon through writers kind of like expressing ideas of things getting better, and we're progressing forward, and people kind of latched onto it. So when it popped into like the science realm, excuse me, when it popped into the science realm, everybody was already ready for that idea, and that doesn't like immediately disqualify the idea of evolution, but like some of the scientists that were pushing it, they said that even though we don't have that much evidence for evolution right now, but we would rather hold on to this than believe in a supernatural, creation. So the bias was toward evolution without any evidence. And then the other point is that if evolution is true and there's only material, then your own view cuts the legs off of what you can know, because then we can't know any truth, because evolution is not, aiming for truth. It's just aiming for survival, right? So it doesn't matter if you believe a lie or if you believe the truth. The only thing matters that you survive and pass on your genes. So all it is just chemicals fizzing in our brain, and we don't actually know anything. It's just these sounds produced these chemical reactions in the brain, and I don't feel anything. It just, the chemicals make me think I feel or whatever, or express that I feel, because we have materialism cuts knowledge down at its ankles. It cannot stand on its own. So that's the two ideas I was gonna just bring up.
No, those are definitely good topics. I think we can definitely discuss those here in a few, because it's those points are the underlying elements of contemplation of our existence, right? That like, hey, you got kind of two sides here. Like, folks, we can either go down this path or a different one, but you can't claim that they're just going to coincide necessarily, especially if you're espousing the undirected, purposeless aspect, especially of the Dawkins, the way he portrays it all. It's kind of difficult to get there. But now, without further ado, we've got the one and only Donnie, also known as Standing for Truth, is joined an after show. It's been a while since he joined one of mine. He always talks about it, says he's going to. I'm definitely going to, and then he never does. He often eats pizza or something. I think what's going on right now is the fact that his wife just had a baby, and she can't convince him. Like, he's not going and watching movies with her right now, aka having fun. So I think that's why he's now available for this one. But what's up, Donnie? How you doing, man? How'd you feel with the debate?
John, as always, you nail it, brother. I thought this debate, and therefore the after show that is going to result from it, will be, as always, John, with your after shows, one to remember. So I thought, I'm just gonna jump in here, say my piece, but I'm gonna stay here when I run to Walmart real quick, just so I know, I got a spot. So when I get back, the dumpster fire begins. Just kidding. It doesn't have to be a dumpster fire. But yeah, when it comes to the debate, I thought it was entertaining as always. I think these debates that have resulted from the challenge video that we put out a few weeks ago. I think it's at like 20,000 views on Kent's video, on Kent's channel. Me and Raw Matt made it. Kent uploaded it, and I've gotten, I can't even keep up with the requests coming in. So we got a ton of debates on this topic of evolution. And, I'm a little biased, of course, being a young earth creationist. I always enjoy Kent's debates. He's definitely mastered his trade. And I thought Matthew, I should say, made for a solid debate. And although he had a different approach at first, eventually, we got into the fossil record, vestigial organs, DNA, so on and so forth. But I do appreciate Kent's strategy in these debates. And Jackson, you've had 4 rounds with Kent, all great debates, especially your debate on the geological column with Kent.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
But I like how he properly defines evolution, and then makes it clear that, hey, if by evolution you mean dogs and wolves are related, then sure, that's science, that's observable, that's empirical. We're not going to have anything to argue about. But if by evolution you mean dogs and banana plants are related, then that's where the debate begins, right? Because definitely not science wise. It puts the burden on the one in the debate who believes it goes further than saying dogs and wolves are related. So I think he had that approach tonight specifically was good, because the lines of evidence that Matthew did bring forth, DNA, the fossil record, vestigial organs, for example, they didn't really provide much in terms of evidence for universal ancestry. But overall, I was a mod. I had to stay neutral, and I enjoyed it. Matthew, I appreciate him doing it. And we got a ton more debates on that topic. I'm looking forward to Kent and T-Jump specifically. But Mark Drysdale coming out of retirement as well. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the debate. It was fun.
Right, I appreciate that, man. Well, before you run off to Walmart, there's some dude in chat named Beamsy who claims that you're afraid of him, and he's emailed you about a debate, and you never responded. So, do you have anything to say to this guy? I know you've been getting overloaded with emails. So, like, have you gotten to his email yet? Is he like making things up? Like, what's your position on this Beamsy guy?
No, Beamsy's, listen, I've had 94 debates, and he's the one that I'm scared of. You know, he sent a pretty intimidating email. You know, he's got evidence that banana plants and whales are related, and I've been losing sleep ever since. He's a very terrifying person. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I think I think I'm probably just behind on emails. Beamsy, shoot me another email tonight if you can. I'll put it to the top of the list. And now I will say, there's been a few emails that I kind of put on the back burner because they emailed me about the challenge, but they don't want to debate the challenge. It's just like silly topics. Like, listen, I hate God, so let's, you know what I mean? So I was like, you know, these people aren't even worth it. I don't know if that's Beamsy, but yeah, if he wants to take that debate challenge, then for sure. So shoot me an email.
Well, it was kind of interesting. Earlier, I saw a chat where I think he claimed to have a degree in gene biology. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I don't know. Maybe he's from a different country and there's like a different term they use. But yeah, Beams, if you want to clarify that, I'd appreciate it. Well, yeah, man. I mean, who knows? I mean, look, man, we know that you're just afraid of debate. I think you have been out of the debate scene for what, a month or two? I mean, whatever it is. I mean,
well,
somebody
you
who's
moderated my last debate. Remember, John, with Daniel Mira? You had your work cut out for that one.
I know I did, but I've kind of forgotten. It was so long ago. I've
It was
forgotten.
a soteriology one, lose your salvation one.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I'd forgotten about it. Well, yeah, but see, listen,
Fire.
you've been doing all these theology debates. You haven't been doing
Right.
evolution debates. That's
Right.
the point. You're afraid
Yeah.
of evolution debates. Theology is easier. Okay.
Yeah, it's true. I've been out of the game for too long. So you're right, John.
Yeah, at some point, I know you've been trying to get me to come out of retirement. I don't know how long I've been out of retirement. I think my last one was with Steve Williams.
Yeah.
Or
On
Jeffrey
SJ's
Williams.
channel.
Jeffrey Williams. Yeah, that guy was over on SJ's channel. That was an interesting one. But anyway, okay. Well, go off to Walmart. You're welcome to keep talking, but if you want to go to Walmart, go to Walmart. We'll hold you a spot.
Well, let me, John, if I could, right before I leave, and then maybe this will be a good place to spark a conversation. If I could share screen, John, just for, I don't know, 25 seconds, I'd be curious, especially the evolutionists on the panel. I don't know why this argument continues to be brought up. Nothing against Matthew. It's just pretty much brought up in every debate. And then they kind of act like the evolutionists oftentimes act, you know, like my boy Jackson Rowe here. I'm just teasing you. But, you know, like it's young earth creation making it up or something. You know, it was originally, this finding was originally published in secular scientific journals. And then there were many commentaries on the published findings, right? So here's one of the commentaries, and even they point out, they're not young earth creationists, they point out whale reproduction, it's all in the hips. I highly recommend you check that out. New study turns a long accepted evolutionary assumption on its head, finding that whale pelvic bones play a key role in mating. Our research really changes the way we think about the evolution of whale pelvic bones in particular, but more generally about structures we call vestigial. Right. So it's even the secular scientists, those that hold to universal common ancestry, that have been and are pointing out this real fact that the vestigial organ paradigm is pretty much just being overturned. I mean, it's based on scientific ignorance. As a parallel, we are now learning that our appendix is actually quite important in several immune responses, not a functionally useless structure. So, you know, this goes into the fact that these so-called pelvic bones are actually necessary for reproductive purposes. So at best, it's not evidence for universal ancestry and whale evolution. I mean, they can say that, sure, these bones were repurposed at some point, but that's more wishful thinking. That's outside the realm of science. That's just them kind of, you know, fitting in the data into their philosophy, I would say. So, you know, it's not like these so-called pelvic bones, quote unquote, are useless. We know they're there for a reason. So anyways, I don't know. I just wanted to add that.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And real quick, before we Will gets a chance to air his thoughts, and then we get back into open conversation, I've got to address another example of dumbassery that's already happening in the side chat. Okay. So Colt Nino says, yes, Kent certainly does. Nobody goes to school to learn cosmic evolution. It's a made-up term by creationists to lump scientific studies together. So who wants to bet me that maybe that term is also used in secular academia all the way up to some of the most, prestigious universities on the planet? Who wants to bet me that that is not the case? Anybody? Anyone? No? Okay. Well, Occult Nino, whatever your name is, do you want to bet me? Because I'm ready. No? All right. Well, let's just go ahead and put you out of your misery, buddy, and maybe you'll learn not to spew dumbass talking points without actually using Google for 5 seconds. So I'm pulling up harvard.edu. Harvard.edu. I think that this is like all about cosmic evolution, the term that you said was made up by creationists. And look at there. It goes from particulate to galactic to stellar to planetary to chemical, biological, cultural, and future. Oh my goodness gracious. They have a whole website dedicated to this. Each one of these little things is like a clickable link. Oh my goodness, look at this. Can you believe the fact that academics at Harvard have bought in to this propaganda being spewed by creationists? It is just astonishing how much they have been conned. How could they allow this to happen? Man, Occult Nino, you need to go down there and let them know how they have just been completely and utterly conned by people like Kent Hovind. And they even built a website on this topic. I mean, can you believe this, folks? It is just astonishing. It's staggering. I don't know how they can live with themselves.
That was pretty epic, John.
Anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, the end of this stream, you'll see a little clip that I play, and it's a quote from myself. And people say that I'm super arrogant for quoting myself at the end of my streams. It's like on my own channel, I quote myself on my own channel, and somehow it makes me arrogant. Whatever, it's neither here nor there. But the quote is, the difference between confidence and arrogance is being able to back up your BS. And it's amazing to me in the world that we live in, when we have access to Google, when you can go in split seconds, you can go and search and find information, determine whether or not your position is true or false, even on like the surface level, right? Atheists just don't seem to do that very often. It's quite fascinating to me how this happens on a regular basis. And it's like, if I saw something that said harvard.edu and cosmic evolution, I would by default not claim that it has never been mentioned in higher level academia ever. But no, YouTube atheists specifically don't seem to realize that maybe you should do that, and it can help to prevent yourself from just being embarrassingly ignorant on baseline topics that conflict with your worldview. But anyway, enough of my ramble. Who wants to get back into the conversation?
Hey, John, I was thinking maybe I should quote you so then you can quote me quoting you. Anyway, I'm just messing.
Would that let's think about that. Would that make me no longer being arrogant? I don't know. It's a question. I think let's see. Jackson had his hand raised. What's up, man? What's on your mind?
Yeah, I want to talk about the whale thing. There are a lot of fossil whales, and I guess you guys dispute they're whales that have the hind legs, like Myocetus or Cuchicetus or all those acetuses. About 50 of them. But what do you guys think about those?
Well, here's the thing. What you're referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jackson, is extinct creatures you're saying are whales, right? Now, sure. What you're pointing to, are these fully aquatic creatures? Are these land creatures? Like, what are they?
Some of them are semi-aquatic, and some of them appear to be fully aquatic, like Georgicetus didn't have its pelvis wasn't attached to its spine, so it probably would have been fully.
I think Andrew was saying something there.
Oh, I was just adding in our species Basilosaurus and
Basilosaurus.
Dorodon and the like.
Right. Like with Basilosaurus and Durodon, like these are fully aquatic creatures, fully aquatic whales. But the ones that are semi-aquatic, let's say Ambulocetus, for example, or today crocodiles, they're semi-aquatic. Are they evolving into something other than a crocodile or an otter? I mean, Jackson, you made the point in your debate with Kent that maybe an otter or a seal are transitional.
You could call it
because
that.
we don't know where they're going to be a million years from now. You made the point. So if we're just looking at a bone found in the dirt, a fossil where we have no genetics, right? Because the best way to determine ancestry is through genetics. How come it's not just a creature like that? A seal, an otter, a crocodile, something like that. Go ahead. What are your thoughts?
With these fossil whales,
hey guys, quick timeout. So Occult Nino is like doubling down on his dumbassery. Okay, so there was a syllabus link on that website that I shared from Harvard. Okay, but he says that's part of a syllabus. LPP, you're looking for the term cosmology. No, we're talking about cosmic evolution, bro. And here is another book published by the Harvard University Press, titled "Cosmic Evolution: The Rise and Complexity in Nature." I mean, I don't even know what to do at this point. I mean, Occult Nino, are you actually paying attention? Are you listening and reading? Because I'm pulling up the evidence in real time and continuing to obliterate your point. So are you still claiming that cosmic evolution, the term, is made up by creationists and that nobody in academia ever uses the term? Are you still holding to that position? Because again, I have just shown, again, published by Harvard University Press, 2002. Let me highlight this for you in case you're missing it. There it is, right there. Okay. Are you denying that is reality? Are you suggesting that Harvard University Press is run by a bunch of creationists? Is that your position? I don't know how to continue this. It's incredible. Go ahead, guys. Get back to whale penises and such.
Yeah, whale penises. Let's see. Where was I? Let's just use Basilosaurus as an example. Let's say there were no predecessors at all. Now, Answers in Genesis considers Basilosaurus even a whale. Now, if you look at Basilosaurus, there's no melon. There's a small brain. There's their heterodont teeth, unlike modern whales. Their external hind limbs. So it's
wait a minute, stop there. See, Jackson, that's the problem right there. Nobody's going to say Basilosaurus. I mean, if people don't know what a Basilosaurus is, pull up a picture of it on Google. Nobody's going to say that Basilosaurus was walking around anywhere. Okay, that was a massive marine creature, and the hind limbs, quote unquote, they were. The point is, they were far too tiny to have anything to do with walking. So we, from the design standpoint, we'd say, okay, what are these there for? And they were probably there for the same reason why these, so-called functional hind limbs are present today in whales and some marine creatures, is for grasping purposes and reproduction. Again, we don't have the genetics. We don't have the DNA. We have bones found in the dirt. So what are they there for? We know they're not there for walking. No one's going to say Basilosaurus was walking around anywhere. The best. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I said a lot there.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you. It was 60 feet. Yeah, I wasn't doing any walking on land with those tiny hind limbs. But then we can look at Georgicetus, which is basically the immediate ancestor, what they think the immediate ancestor would be. Georgicetus had fairly large hind limbs and more quadrupedal layout, though. And
was Georgicetus a fully aquatic creature, fully aquatic whale, or semi-aquatic?
They think it was probably fully aquatic based on the way it's what am I trying to say? Pelvis attached to its spine, or didn't rather.
Well, was its pelvis being used for actual walking on land, or were they also being used for grasping purposes for reproduction?
Sorry, repeat that.
Were there pelvis bones on Georgicetus? Were they being used for actual walking, or were they being used for grasping purposes? on when it comes to reproduction.
Well, the pelvis bone was very large, and Georgia cetus was about 20 feet or 10 to 20 feet long. I forget which. So it wasn't like Basilosaurus. Its skull structure was basically identical to, even its teeth structure were identical to Basilosaurus.
Well, see, the question again comes down to function. So again, I'm guessing we don't have the genetics. We don't have the genetics of Tiktaalik. We don't have the genetics of any of these so-called whale precursors, these fossil specimens we're looking at. And again, genetics is the best way to determine ancestry, answer the question of ancestry. So
Sure.
we just look like we're looking at extinct creatures, extinct species. These so-called pelvis bones seem to be used for the same purpose that we see they're being used today for, which is reproduction. Nothing's more important than reproduction. I mean, if you're not having babies and passing on your genes, then you're failing in terms of evolution. So yeah, anyways, go ahead.
If I can have a go at that, if you're done, Jackson, I'd
Yeah,
like
you can
to.
go ahead.
Yes. So the definition of vestigial, as I understand it, is not based on function or lack of function. It's based around comparative anatomy and how rudimentary the structure appears, how basically downgraded it looks based on those comparative anatomical features. And secondly, so just making that point here, vestigial, even by Darwin's metric, when he wrote in The Origin of Species, never meant completely useless. He didn't define it that way. And secondly, when we talk about transitional species, transitional forms, I should say, we're not talking about direct ancestry. Again, even Darwin recognized this, and he never predicted that we would find directly intermediate forms. That was not his prediction. Instead, we're looking at common anatomical patterns. So I'm just making that point here. We're not talking about direct ancestral lineages from one generation to the next. That's not what we're trying to do here.
There's a couple things I'd like to comment on there. In the past, evolutionists did define vestigial organs, and they had about 180 of them as organs that no longer function, have no known function, or just useless evolutionary leftovers. But they've now redefined vestigial organs for the fact that these 180 so-called useless organs are now known to be functional, right? The tonsils, the appendix, the pineal gland, the thymus, we can go on and on and on. So it's out of the realm of science to say, well, sure, they're functional, like the appendix is part of our immune system, right? And it's important for healthy bacterial content. So the evolutionist wants to say, well, that's the function now. The function's been repurposed, or it's different than what it was in the past. Well, see, that's where you leave science, and that's where you go to philosophy, because no, we see that the appendix is functional, and it's functional for this reason, and it's functional in this process, and that's what we observe. That's the empirical data.
But notice how I didn't talk about function or being adapted to a new function or anything. I was specifically talking about the definition in terms of where the structure is rudimentary from a homologous standpoint.
Well, and that's the thing, is they've changed the definition from what they used to define a vestigial organ as.
But even that is a problem. Just because something looks, anatomically similar does not mean it's an ancestor or a previous version. I mean, how many ways can you design a wheel? I
didn't talk about ancestral versions either. Let me provide an example.
Hey, real quick before you put your example out there. Big thanks, shout out to Mitchell, $5 super chat. Thanks so much. It says creation cannot be created without a creator. Man, look at him getting all some busting out the C words there. People might freak out. Okay, continue.
Yeah, so Darwin talked about, for example, its features proper function, in the sense that if you were to look at an ostrich wing, you would be able to tell that it is vestigial for its proper function of flying. And the bone structure of the wing, for example, shows that it is a wing. It's just highly reduced. And like structures like that. I mean, you look at the appendix, for example, it used to be much larger and much more sophisticated for digestive purposes. And we can see
Well,
that
that's
in
a
other
loss
animals
of-
today.
Well, that's a loss of function. That's an evidence of degeneration.
We're not talking about the
Degeneration.
mechanism of evolution here. We're talking about common descent specifically. We're talking about the patterns.
But what I'm saying is what you're putting forth here is not evidence that whales and banana plants are related. What you guys point to
Again,
is a
we're
so-called
talking about the
vestigial organ.
mechanism versus common patterns. You're
I
not
understand.
making a
I
distinction
understand what
there.
you're saying, but you're saying, well, the appendix used to be better at its job. It used to be larger. Well, guess what? It's still functional now. It's still doing its job. And sure, it's worse at doing its job. That's not evidence for large-scale evolution. That's not evidence for a mechanism that's going to make large-scale evolution possible. That's an observation that's consistent with degeneration. We're getting worse. Organs are getting worse. They're not as good at their jobs as they used to be. Again, that's not evidence for your burden of proof to show
And
us.
again, there is a reduced appendix in humans. In other animals, the appendix and much of the digestive system is not as reduced. How do you explain that?
That's because the appendix is used differently in other creatures. Okay,
Why?
we have designed objects that are the same thing, but they're used differently and purposed differently in different modes of transportation. The appendix in the humans, the appendix in a chimpanzee, the appendix in a rabbit will be used differently. It's the same organ used differently depending on the creature you're looking at.
Sure. In design, you have similar form for similar function, etc. But in life, you have similar forms for different functions and different forms for similar functions. That's not what we see in a design perspective in humans.
We see that humans design things that have different functions depending on what they're being used for. And that's what we see in the biological world too. For example,
That's not what we see. You're saying that form is dependent on function. We do not see that in biological systems.
Form is what? Repeat that.
Do you claim that form is dependent on function? The anatomical features are dependent on the designer's function in mind.
So if we're looking at a specific anatomical feature, or we're looking at a genetic sequence, then we, from the common design perspective, will predict function. So what is that function?
No, I mean, is the form going to be correlated with the function? Is it going to be dependent on what the specific function is in mind? So if you have a mole's paw, for example, or a cow's hoof, how would you expect them to differ based on function according to your model? Is that what you predict?
Well, it's going to depend on what the creature is and whether they go back to a common ancestor. For example, we would define a kind as all of those organisms that go back to a common ancestry, a common genetic archetype, I guess you could say.
Well, that seems pretty arbitrary to me.
Well, no, because
where
that's
you draw
why
the
we
line.
look to. Well, that's why we look to function as a way to predict what is and what is not related. And that's why when we look to, let's say, a structure, an organ like, I don't know, the appendix, or what you would say in genetics is neutral variation, right? We know that a lot of what is said to be neutral variation is actually multifunctional, and that secondary function is going to be different depending on what is and what isn't related. So we have humans where we would expect certain sequences that are similar to the chimpanzee, let's say, but because we would say the chimpanzee and the human are not related through common ancestry, there will be different functions in terms of information flow, in
Well,
terms
right,
of gene expression.
right. You're
Regulation
talking about
that.
like codon biases and things like that. Like we've tested those scenarios before. Separate ancestry hasn't worked,
No, separate
even when taking
ancestry
that
has
into
actually.
account.
No. Here's the thing. Separate ancestry has worked because what has been demonstrated through these statistical hierarchies is the existence of nested hierarchies. Nobody disagrees with that, whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist. But it's the creationist that predicts functional variation rather than neutral variation.
Right.
And
Well,
more every single day, that's exactly what we...
Yeah, let me rephrase what I'm saying. So I'm saying that sure, you expect there to be function, but is the form correlated with the function in reference to like, okay, the designer did this, he designed it for this purpose. When we go out and test it in these neutral functional bits, whatever you want to call them, the sequence similarity and differences do not correlate with individual species, individual kind, families, environmental functions. Like their form is not correlated to function.
Right. I get what you're saying, but the prediction when it comes to the design model would suggest that the secondary functions in that which you would say is codon degeneracy or neutral variation is actually functional to the organism we're looking at. Like a human and a chimpanzee are not related. So the secondary function in, let's say, third position codon variation will have to do with information flow particular to the organism you're looking at, which means information flow in a human, information flow in a chimpanzee, and information flow in a dog is going to be different. So your
yes, that's why I'm
function...
saying we've tested that as well, and the evidence is statistically in favor of common ancestry.
No. It's statistically in favor of the existence of nested hierarchical patterns. Nobody disagrees with that. But what we're finding when it comes to these genetic sequences that we're looking at that are forming hierarchies, we're finding out that they're multifunctional. And the secondary function has to do with information flow. And the function that has to do with information flow is different depending on what organism you're looking at and whether or not they are related. Does that make sense?
I think I need to clarify here that you can have a nested hierarchy in pretty much anything. What matters is whether that hierarchical pattern is statistically significant. Because you can have a nested hierarchy in an opposite pattern to what would be expected of common ancestry. It depends on if the features are correlated in such a way that the hierarchical pattern is more statistically significant than would be expected by chance. That is what is expected of common ancestry. Now, why, from a designer perspective, would we expect that in all regions of the genome? Because that's what we see.
That's because the universal ancestry model predicts neutral variation. Okay, so when we're looking at these statistical hierarchies based on, let's say, neutral variation in third position codon redundancy, okay, they're assuming that this variation is neutral rather than having a secondary function. That's why we look to like protein moonlighting, for example, in these nuclear DNA proteins that are multifunctional. So we're predicting the same thing for mitochondrial DNA proteins, that these proteins, let's say cytochrome C, that form nested hierarchical patterns that you want to say can only be true if universal common ancestry is true. We're saying no, they probably participate in multifunctionality just like the nuclear DNA proteins.
Yes, and
that's
I'm
a
saying,
valid prediction.
And I'm saying that even when accounting for codon biases and secondary functions like that, there have been tests on this in primates, for example, and they found that follows a common descent, a nested hierarchical pattern as well. It's not different for different organisms.
Okay, so what you're putting forth here, let's use cytochrome C as an example, right? So if we were to take from a design perspective, okay, let's ask the question, why would, let's say, the zebra ATP synthase proteins have a different mitochondrial DNA sequence than, say, the toucan, a bird, right? From a design perspective, shouldn't they be identical? And you would argue that the differences between the animals reflect time since the last common ancestor. That's why they have the same function, right? The synthesis of ATP, for example. But they're different because of time since last common ancestor. And our prediction is, well, is this really the only function that the ATP synthase proteins perform? And that's where we look to protein multifunctionality. Someone like Dr. Nathaniel Jensen has written highly technical papers.
Yes, and I think, as you admitted, he hasn't tested those hypotheses yet.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of these function-related predictions require mutagenesis experiments, requires genetic knockouts, and we are just in the infancy of understanding the DNA language and performing these types of experiments. So, of course, a lot of them have not been tested, but the prediction is based on a trajectory that favors genome-wide functionality. So it's not...
Well, sure, even though there's a trajectory, but if the data isn't there, then I have no reason to accept what you claim.
Are you denying the existence of protein moonlighting in nuclear
DNA? No,
proteins?
I'm saying that if you haven't tested those hypotheses and shown that they're distinct and distinct kinds, then if you haven't shown the results of that, then I have no reason to suspect that that's going to be the case. You need to go out and move the legwork here.
See, here's the thing, though. You are guilty of what evolutionists were guilty of 100 years ago when they said, well, there's about 180 vestigial organs, worthless, functionless organs. Then that was overturned. Then the junk DNA paradigm, well, these genetic sequences, these pseudogenes are useless. They're inherited genetic mistakes, shared genetic mistakes. That's being overturned. Paper just came out recently showing function in beta globin, so-called pseudogenes. And now you're saying, well, yeah, we haven't yet, tested for protein moonlighting in these mitochondrial DNA proteins. So, until you do those experiments, I mean, it's just ridiculous. We have protein moonlighting evidence for nuclear DNA proteins. Why wouldn't we have that also for mitochondrial DNA proteins?
Because we don't have the data.
So would you make a prediction that there is no multifunctionality in protein moonlighting and mitochondrial DNA proteins? Would you put that on paper and make that prediction?
No, I would not predict that. I would predict that it would follow a contingent pattern based on what we expect of common descent.
No, because if the secondary function has to do with cell optimization and information flow specific to the organism that we're looking at, then we are no longer looking at neutral variation. We are no longer looking at just redundancy, right? The fact that the cell uses these redundant elements to tolerate error. No, now we know these redundant elements, let's say in third position codon variation, are also used in information flow and in helping slow and speed processes in the cell. That's a secondary function that's not predicted by the evolutionary model.
Well, I mean, even the redundant, the secondary functions you're talking about, they're not uniform across the genome. They're highly like codon biases, for example. Those are most fine-tuned, I guess, for lack of a better word, in highly essential, highly expressed genes. And even when you look at across vertebrates, for example, with relatively small population sizes, selection is very weak on those genes. The mutations occur more or less at random, probably oversimplifying there, but there's no functional constraint there. So the codon biases, the constraints due to that are not uniform across species or even across the genome.
I think you're missing my point, because where you say there are biases, right? We're saying there's genome-wide functionality, including multifunctionality in whatever sequence you're looking at, forming nested hierarchical patterns.
Yes,
so
and I'm saying across the genome that multi-wide functionality isn't the same across the genome.
Okay, here's the thing, Andrew. How much would you say both protein coding and non-protein coding, okay, of the genome is functional on a percentage wise?
I'm talking about codon biases here. We're not talking about protein coding, non-coding DNA
Well, yes,
function
we are,
overall.
because you have to maintain a genome, as somebody like Dr. Dan would say, a genome that is no more than roughly, let's say, 20% functional, 15% functional.
I was specifically talking about codon biases and the level of constraint there.
You're missing if the genome is 80% functional or more, that destroys your arguments from statistical hierarchies, because we're looking at genomes that are mostly functional, and therefore the genetic markers that you'd be looking at forming nested hierarchical patterns are actually there for a functional purpose. Okay, and
I mean, even then we would have the silent nucleotide sites.
Right. But again, these redundant elements are not just there to tolerate error. We're finding more and more that they're there to help with information flow.
Yes,
for example,
and I am saying that the level of redundancy there is not the same across the genome, even in these silent nucleotide sites.
Okay, let me ask you.
Andrew, are you hang on, Andrew? Are you suggesting that there is no variation in UTR regions? Or sorry, UTRs?
I'm not familiar with the term ETR. Can you explain that to me?
Untranslated region.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so are you suggesting that there's no differentiation in that?
In like whether a region is untranslated or not?
Well, no, I mean in terms of, okay, so the untranslated portion means that it's not necessarily undergoing, it's not part of the protein synthesis, but they're finding out that they do have significant function, just not in terms of the like directly being turned into part of a protein.
Or
polypeptide, right? So what about the variations from introns, for example, and their obvious significance in relation to the spliceosome? Have you accounted for that?
In relation to what?
Well, the overall argument that you're making.
Well, my argument is centralized around the third codon position specifically. That's all I'm talking about right now.
And the third position codon is position. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay, so are you familiar with the triplet of triplets in relation to the code and its direct relevance to synthesis?
Like how fast it's transcribed and whatnot?
Well, that's one component to it. No, they've discovered that, I believe the paper was published in 2018. They have discovered that the adjacent codons have direct relevance to the overall synthesis, up to, I believe it's the adjacent 5 codons.
In certain species and in certain genes, yes.
Okay, so are you suggesting that I don't think that's just certain species. I think that's a pretty broad.
I mean, you could say it's in most species, yes, but it's not as important I should say.
Well, at this point, given the fact they just started studying it, that's a rather bold assertion you're making there, that it doesn't have relevance. Are you suggesting they've actually had the time to do a comparison on a concept that's relatively new from like actual research?
Why? I mean, they've admitted in terms of population genetics that we wouldn't expect it to be the same in different species.
Well, John, let me ask a question.
Okay. Well, actually, hang on. Emery has been in here for quite some time, and I'll let you guys go back and forth for a solid 10 minutes. So, Emery, what's up? Welcome to the stream. How you been? I haven't seen you in a while. Hope everything's going well. What are your thoughts on if you want to air on the debate? Or I'm guessing that since this topic that SFT and Andrew have been going back and forth on is one of your personal interests, I don't know if you want to hop into this little dialogue.
Well, thank you, John, for hosting this. I didn't see the debate. I was busy looking up the genetic diversity of butterflies. So don't ask. Just don't ask. But anyway, so I can't really commentate on the debate. Honestly, I thought that the discussion that was going on was interesting. That's why I popped in. But, I mean, you guys were having your own discussion there, so I didn't want to intrude. But I thought it was an interesting back and forth. There's a little bit of you all talking past each other, because I think to a certain extent you both agree on certain things, and you just are using terms that don't quite, or maybe saying it in ways that are going past each other because you're looking at it from different ways. So,
yeah, that might be true.
I appreciate that, Emery. I wanted to ask you a question,
sure,
based on what we're talking about, Andrew. When it comes, because since you specifically want to focus on the redundant codons, how would you, from an evolutionary starting point, okay, from an evolution-based position, how do you explain the origin of this dual coding functionality of redundancy that you would say form hierarchies that can only be true if universal common descent is true? So how do you explain what type of evolutionary mechanisms can you point to that would evolve this type of dual coding functionality of redundancy?
Are you asking me or Emery?
I'm asking you, Andrew.
Oh, yeah. Well, I obviously don't know, but that's irrespective of the question, because we're looking at the pattern of whether or not there's evidence for common descent in general.
Well, I got to stop you. Well, I think you're dodging. No, this is exactly my point. Okay.
Well, I'm saying you could posit like common ancestry, for example, and that's irrespective of whether it was due to like selection or drift or things of that nature.
You're positing ancestry because of the existence of nested hierarchical patterns. Both models would predict that humans are going to share more in terms of anatomy, morphology, physiology, and genetics with a chimpanzee than with a dog. Okay, the question is, are these nested hierarchical patterns reflective of descent or design? The design hypothesis
let me stop you. Why would we expect that?
Why would you expect what?
For humans to share more in common with great apes in the design perspective.
Oh my goodness, Andrew, dude, we've gone over this a billion times, bro. I mean, I don't know how to explain this. Have you ever actually gone and looked at how a freaking framework for a application works and like what goes into that and why you would have so many similarities in a similar system? Like,
yes, and we talked about how the limits of human programming do not apply to it.
What's more similar?
Oh my god! SFT, hang on, no, Andrew, we're talking about the same freaking principles. I have explained this to you. I have beaten this over your head. Who knows how many times at this point? Okay, it's the exact same freaking principles that we use in our systems have to be accounted for in the biological system. Okay, it's the exact same concepts. The exact same type of thing has to be accounted for. Okay?
Sorry,
I don't know how many times. Dude, I don't know how many times I have to explain this to you, bro. If you have a code base that is necessary, okay, and you have a whole plethora of similar functions, of course you're going to have similarities, dude. This is not that complicated. This is how it works in everything that we create. Okay.
Yes, and I was saying that an all-powerful designer didn't have to do that.
Just because they didn't have to doesn't mean why wouldn't they? And again, I've also beaten what I'm about to say over your head.
And you can't use it as evidence.
Andrew,
there's actually a good case for why a designer would do it that way, though, because a designer like the Christian God would want to make this universe comprehensible to its creation, right? So using a whole bunch of different codes for different species isn't going to be comprehensible. You're not going to be able to make conclusions.
And how in the world are we going to study in the lab? How are we going to be able to look for, I don't know, cures and study the biological world if we don't have similarities in proteins, DNA, RNA, anatomy, whatever?
Okay,
with other creatures.
One more point. Okay, Andrew, again, I have told you this over and over again. Okay, I've had developers on the show who have agreed with me on this over and over again. Okay. If you were a awesome dev, you would use the same code base, right?
Are you saying the almighty designer was limited in the human sense?
No, it has nothing to do with limitation. It has to do with what is smart. You can't use it. Andrew, silence, or I'm kicking you, dude. We have gone over this for almost 2 years now. Okay, and all you come back with is, well, if they're super smart, they could use a bunch of different ones. Like, dude, that
that's
is
not the
borderline
point I was
moronic.
making.
It's
Are
borderline
you
moronic.
saying God should have used different
And-
building blocks other than DNA, RNA, and protein? Like, what's your point?
And second, quick, before you respond, and Beamsy, dude, do not have your degree that you're claiming. Okay, you're comparing coding and chemicals. They are two different things. Obviously, you're yet another YouTube atheist dumbass who wants to claim that there's not actually code you have to account for. Okay, this is ridiculous, man. Like this, I have gone over this so many times. This Richard Dawkins did a video on this topic with John Perry like 2 months ago, telling atheists to stop being idiots and making this claim. It's the medium, the substance that makes the medium has zero relevance to whether or not something is the information logic. It's just so obnoxious. And Andrew, I swear, dude, if you make the statement that if you're super smart, that means you would use a bunch of other random codes rather than one that's optimized in the extreme to accomplish your objective, I will never let you on my stream ever again, because that's just moronic. And I know you can't possibly be that dumb. Okay, so please,
why would God go back to the
stop being an
drawing
idiot?
board
It's amazing to me. Oh,
Well, that's not the claim I was making. If I can,
Okay, share my screen, John. I want to ask Andrew a basic question. A yes or no?
I'd like to explain what the
Yeah,
point I
just
was
let him
trying to make with
clarify.
that. Yeah, so the point I was trying to make with all that is that if a supernatural designer, if you want to claim that X idea has this piece of evidence is in favor, it's evidence for X idea, what you need to do is show why it's specific to that idea and not to any of the competing ideas. Saying it's simply compatible with the data does not mean it's evidence for. So when I talk about an ultimate designer or whatnot, he could have done it in numerous ways. Just having it compatible and saying, oh, he could have done it this way, that doesn't mean that the pattern that we do see is therefore evidence for that idea just as much as it is evidence for common descent. That is the point I was making.
Okay, Andrew, let me jump in here. I want to make a prediction, okay? Starting from the Bible, okay, and the account given in the Bible of creation, God tells us that we as humans are made in the image of God. That means there should be something about us that reflects the design. Okay, so we as young earth creationists have predicted, well, if we're made in the image of God, then maybe we can get a sense for how God designed the biological world based on how we, since we're made in the image of God, design things. And it just turns out that we as human engineers design in homologous patterns. We design in nested hierarchical patterns. For example, and don't play your semantics with me, Andrew, does a sedan share more with a truck than it does with an airplane?
I mean, you could come at that from multiple different angles. It's highly subjective.
Okay, does a human share more with a chimpanzee than it does with a whale?
That, on the other hand, is less subjective. Yes.
How's that less? So are you telling me here on the screen, John, are you sharing my screen? You see these semantics that these evolutionists want to play? You're telling me it's difficult to answer the question, is a sedan, let's say a Chevy Cruise,
What character are you weighing more importantly?
Is a Chevy Cruise more similar to a Ford Fusion than a Chevy Cruise is to a bicycle?
Who are you asking, me?
Yeah, you're the evolutionist here.
So, okay, re-ask the question again.
Okay, is a Chevy Cruise, okay, let's just say, is a basic sedan more similar to a hatchback than a basic sedan is to a bicycle?
Again, it depends on what characters you're weighing more importantly.
Oh,
Do you mind?
Well, I want to ask one question before you jump in.
Okay.
Emery, since
I feel like I've been talking a while.
Stop. If you want to be difficult, that's fine. I want to ask you again the differentiating lines of evidence, because you failed when it came to answering the question, how do evolutionary processes which we know selection sees the short term, not the long term. So how in the world do evolutionary processes, naturalistic evolutionary processes, evolve that which requires long-term planning, like the dual functional nature of genetic redundancy, for example, which we would say, okay, the dual function has to do with information flow and cell optimization in creatures, and that is going to be different depending on what is and what isn't related. That's how we can answer this question of ancestry. But, and I heard you bring up de novo gene synthesis the other night. How do you explain the existence of these taxonomically restricted and essential genes that most creatures have, these unique genetic sequences known as orphan genes? How do you explain that lack of consistent hierarchy, Andrew?
Well, I think it's still an open question at this point, but I think it's just as much a problem for your guys' position as it is possibly for
How in the
mine.
world is it a problem for our position?
Because these orphan genes are generally specific to the species level. That means that kinds can't exist if what you're saying is if your reasoning is taken to the logical extreme.
Yeah, I have something to add to that.
Yeah, well, I just want to rebut that real quick. Okay, listen, as you can see here on this slide, orphan genes have key roles in a multitude of complex genetic and biochemical pathways. Okay, they're integrated into the genetic information systems of life. Okay, you have no explanation. Gene duplication fails, horizontal gene transfer fails, de novo gene synthesis is just a circular mess and joke. Okay, so the only logical and parsimonious explanation is these were designed, and the fact that we find unique genes and gene sets across different species actually demonstrates separate ancestry, because you can't explain how a new orphan gene pops up and is essential to sustain healthy life processes in the cell. So, Andrew, let me ask you again.
Are you
how do you explain
then saying that many species level kinds don't exist then?
No, because here's the thing. We as creationists, we look back to the expansion of genetic information because we hold to created heterozygosity. So over time, you're going to lose orphan genes. So of course, let's say we look to the family level, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family.
Well, then why can't I say that orphan genes were lost over evolutionary time then?
Explaining how orphan genes are lost over time doesn't explain the origin of orphan genes. We would say the orphan genes were initially designed, and there's been a sorting out of genetic information and diversity in the thousands of years since creation. So sure, if we look to species within a family, let's say we look to the canid family, okay, or we look to the cat family, we say the species within that family are related, but we do have some orphan genes in one species that's not in another. Well, just through basic speciation processes, we would expect that that the original orphan genes are going to be sorted out. So we can go about and analyze and see, for example, with Adam and Eve, with humans, we are using linkage blocks. Dr. Sanford and Carter are figuring out what the original genome looked like. But the point is, you have no explanation naturalistically for the origin of orphan genes. But we do. It's exactly what we would expect from a common design standpoint. So I know I said a lot there. Go ahead.
Okay, Andrew, before you respond, when you get done, we're going to allow some other folks to...
yeah, I think I've been talking way too much. I might as well head out soon anyway. I think Jackson had something to say anyway.
But did you want to respond to the point that SFT just made, and then before we open it up?
No, I think we'll just keep going from there.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I'm guessing Emery probably has something he wants to say on this, and then Kevin's joined us. Actually, Landon hasn't had a chance to talk. Actually, Landon, let's see. Emery get to talk, then Landon came in. Landon, do you want to have anything you want to say about the debate and everything before we? Then Kevin, you can go, and then Jamie, and then we'll get back into conversation.
Yeah, I'll give a few of my thoughts. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, coming through good.
All right. I thought it was a cool debate. I thought it was a little bit unusual because usually when, kind of like when Jackson debated Kent, Jackson had a, kind of like a slideshow, and that's usually how it goes. But trying to provide evidence. But Matthew, he didn't really have anything like that. He just seemed like he was just kind of winging it in a way. It seemed like he didn't really have a plan necessarily. I enjoy listening to him, but I felt like he didn't really provide any evidence or what he thought was evidence, and it kind of like became more of a semantics debate with him talking about what evolution is, and whether or not it has anything to do with ID, stuff like that. And I thought it was, I don't know, maybe it was just a bit unusual for me because usually I guess his Matthew's approach was a little bit different to me, but I thought it was a cool debate.
Right on, right on. Yeah, it seems like it seems to be a trend in a lot of people's opinion overall about the about tonight's debate. But appreciate your thoughts there. And let's see. All right, Kevin, what's up, man? Welcome to the stream. How you doing? What are your thoughts?
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Good to see you. And brother Donnie, you too, man. Yeah, so I just want to drop in a couple points real quick, just leave my piece. Number one, the Ashley phosphate fossil beds absolutely decimate this idea of evolution that's being presented in the textbooks today. We have human remains, dinosaur remains, megalodon remains, all sorts of different things, all found in the same layers. Man always lived with all these different kinds of animals. There is no evolution. Number two, it is obvious that what we live in, this reality, is design. There is order and design to all of existence. We have symbiotic relationships. Everything is the way it is, and it's the same as how it's always been. Okay, so the God that created this universe, that brought order to the universe, 2,000 years ago became a man because we broke his commandments. We broke his law. We're all sinners and we're guilty before him. And no one can keep his morality of good, which is why he came down and kept it perfectly for us and offered himself as a sacrifice on a cross. And after 3 days rose again. And anyone who trusts on his name, which is Jesus, he promises that he will give you eternal life and you will never perish. It is obvious that God exists. Stop resisting the truth. Your conscience bears record against what you believe. The evolution is false. Evolution is a lie. Look up, I encourage any atheist listening or anyone here in the chat room, look up Ashley phosphate fossil beds, and you will see that humans and dinosaurs have been found together. They're not separated by millions of years in evolution. Dinosaurs didn't become birds and all this nonsense. Okay, I just want to drop my piece. Thanks for letting me talk, John.
No, I appreciate that. I'll have to look into that topic for sure. It sounds very interesting. Appreciate the well-spoken words there. Okay, let's see. Who dropped out? Who am I forgetting? Okay, we lost Andrew, and we had some. Who else dropped out?
Jamie left too.
Oh, that's right. Jamie, get back in here. It's your turn now, buddy. Okay. Anyway, oh, Kevin dropped off too. Okay, appreciate you, Kevin. Emery, do you have anything you want to address in the dialogue that was going back and forth? Emery, you're unmuted for talking. All right. Well, Emery has been distracted. Okay. Jax. Oh, he came off mute. What's up, Emery?
I let everybody else go. I was going to talk to Andrew, but that opportunity is gone. So.
All right. Anything you want to just talk about in that topic?
No, I think the topic has been done to death.
Okay. So, out of curiosity, am I correct or incorrect in and maybe not in all cases, but in many cases, Intron and UTR portions are not necessarily analyzed in the comparisons, hierarchy comparisons and such?
It depends on what you're doing and what you're using. Sometimes they will just use the actual protein coding sequences. A lot of times they will remove the introns, but it's not a guarantee. And it depends on if they do a full mitochondrial genome sequence, then, well, everything's in. So it really, it's highly dependent. You take it paper by paper, John.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, part of the reason I asked that is you're right, it varies, obviously, but my curiosity really stems from the fact that we seem to be discussing or discovering all sorts of different reasons for things like UTRs, introns, the relevance obviously to the spliceosome, all those different things. And to me, it's like, if you, in many cases, have removed that, it's not compared at all. It might be full sequence analysis, perhaps, from mitochondria or whatever. Yes, but that's microscopic compared to the totality of what would actually need to be compared in order to prove the positions that are being taken. Does that make sense? No, I'm talking about from the hierarchical perspective. If all those things have relevance, and then they need to be addressed. In my opinion, they need to be addressed directly, not indirectly.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, ideally, now we aren't here and we couldn't computationally do this, but ideally you'd be comparing whole genomes. But we cannot computationally do that right now, I don't think. And we don't have enough whole genomes to do it either. But ideally you'd be doing just full genome compares. But the thing is, those things are, megabases in length. They're huge sequences. And just downloading one of those sequences takes significant time if you ever tried to do it. I mean, let's put it this way. I've done phylogeny runs with 70, 80 mitochondrial DNA sequences in them, and those are 30,000 base pairs apiece. Those phylogeny runs, and I'm not running on a great laptop, but so if a more powerful thing could do it faster, but those runs take 24 to 48 hours to run the whole thing. Now just imagine doing millions or billions of base pairs. So we aren't there yet. Hopefully one of these days we'll get there, but ideally that's where I'd like to get to.
Right. That's kind of where I'm going with all that is there's such very strong assertions made about all these comparisons, right? But to your point, we're not even doing the full comparison. So it's so if you're only comparing a little microscopic portion of something and not even all of those that you have are being directly compared, to me, you're making a gigantic leap to argue that you have can extrapolate this out for everything, which is what I feel is being done in a lot. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that all of academia is doing that, but especially it seems to me on the more the surface level and in YouTube dialogues, people seem to be operating from this position that, oh, this is all 100% already accounted for and proven beyond all doubt. Anybody who says otherwise is just, in denial of reality.
Yeah, anybody who's making that kind of claim about phylogenetics hasn't read enough phylogenetic literature. The phylogeneticists and cladists themselves will admit that it's impossible to completely prove a phylogeny. You can't do it. Now, obviously, that's kind of the way science operates. You don't actually try to prove anything. You try to disprove it. But there is, I think, to a certain extent, there is a level of certainty that is probably unwarranted. Let me just kind of give you an example of this that's outside of phylogenetics. Some of the research I'm into with graduate school involves looking at genetic diversity of various species. And I will calculate genetic diversity based on, I just did one paper where it was 2 genes for an organism that of probably I didn't look, I don't remember exactly how many base pairs, but it's 2 genes in a population of about 100 individuals, a little bit more than that, but roughly 100 individuals, 2 genes, and that's what I have to use as the genetic diversity for that population. For the entire genome, I have to use that as the proxy for 2 genes, and that's probably, a couple thousand base pairs at maximum. And the thing probably has a genome size. I know the mitochondrial genome size is in the 30,000s, and I'm just talking about 2 genes of a couple thousand, and that's not even the full genome size. So we're making a lot of extrapolations from very little data, and I can see this ending very, very badly in 30 or 40 years once we've got more DNA sequenced, and once we were able to compare more, we've got better computing. Because as it stands right now, we're really extrapolating from not a lot in a lot of cases. Now, certain taxa, we have better data. Canids, felids, hominids, we have better data for those things. But for a lot of taxa, it's really we're very data poor, and we're making extrapolations based on very small amounts of data that I do not feel comfortable staking my online reputation says, yes, we know this, when, well, I'm working with 2 genes. I don't know for sure. I just can't tell you.
Well, and I think the additional component of that too is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but a lot of the non-coding regulatory components that do have impact on the end functional outcome are also not being calculated into these equations either.
Generally, when you do a molecular phylogeny, you're using coding sequences, not non-coding sequences. I don't. I'm trying to remember now if I've ever seen one where they used non-coding sequences. I don't want to say they never do because I've not read every phylogenetic paper that's ever been printed. But usually they're working with 2 or 3 genes maximum, unless they're doing a gene tree, unless they're doing gene trees, in which case they could be using who knows how many genes. But usually it's a couple of genes. I don't usually see non-coding DNA. But I agree that probably should be something that should be being looked at. If you're gonna use a gene where you know that X section of non-coding DNA influences that particular gene, you probably should include that in your phylogeny because it's involved. Now, obviously, if you don't know what that particular non-coding sequence does, it's a little tough to find a homologous one to run it against on another organism. But if you know what the non-coding sequence does, and you know it affects the gene that you're studying, or that the genes you're using to build your phylogeny, probably ought to include it.
And is it fair to say that our knowledge of the functions of the non-coding portions of the genome is extremely limited, especially in comparison to the coding regions? In which
compared to the coding regions, yes, our knowledge of the non-coding regions is exploding. There's lots of papers coming out about microsatellite function, about pseudogene function, even about various other supposed junk DNA functional elements, transposable elements, etc. There's a bunch of these non-coding DNA that is currently being the papers are coming out saying, okay, it does this, it does this, it does this. But in terms of relatively to the coding DNA, yeah, we're way behind on the non-coding stuff because it was junk for 50 years and nobody wanted to look at it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. There was a 2020 paper in Nature specifically on pseudogenes, and in the abstract, they make the point that we've been calling, basically the point you just made, right? We've been calling this junk forever. We need to stop that. It needs to be reconsidered. We're finding too much functionality for it. And then basically the entire paper was proving that point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If I could say something, that's why I find it fascinating when these big name theistic evolutionists like Dennis Venema, Joshua Stramidas, William Lane Craig, they want to, if anyone's wondering, I call Joshua Stramidas because his best arguments like TMR4A, time to most recent 4 allele, are based on straw man arguments and straw man understanding of the biblical creation model. So that's besides the point. So they want to compromise the Bible based on pseudogene related arguments, for example. Like Dr. Dennis Venema, if you watch his debate with Nathaniel Jensen, which is one of my favorite debates of all time, I think Jensen did a fantastic job. His main argument almost the entire time was pseudogenes and the pseudogenes that reflect nested hierarchical patterns. Just like Andrew was looking to neutral variation and saying, look, hierarchies, right? But as John was pointing out, and you too, Emery, all this is being overturned more and more every single day. We're finding function after function for pseudogenes and function for all of these genetic markers that they want to look to say this reflects hierarchies and therefore descent. So it's like, as Tompkins and Jensen put it, egg on their face, egg on Venema's face, egg on these guys' faces. I mean, it's just like it's decades ago biology is my point. The arguments that they're using to say evolution's true apparently, and then compromise the Bible. So, anyways, I yield.
Yep. To be fair to William Lane Craig doesn't know a gene from an intron. He's just listening to what the scientists are telling him. I guarantee you, if I asked him to define a gene or define an intron, he'd look at me like I didn't know what he's a theologian, not a scientist. So I'm not going to too much for.
Yeah, it was obvious. Who was he debating? I forget who he debated, but the whole aspect of him trying to explain or account for the morality via evolution was like the most painful. Like his entire, like all of his arguments was awesome, and then when it got to that point, it was like he was undergoing mental gymnastics to try and account for that. It was crazy. Okay, real quick, super chat from the one and only George Bond down under. He says the Ashley phosphate beds, hundreds of millions of fossils in an 18-inch thick geological layer. Appreciate that, George. I know he's said he was watching the Australian Open, which unfortunately whoever wins this year is probably going to have an asterisk next to their name once the world goes back to normal, given the fact that the power mad Aussie minister of what was his title? It was Minister of Immigration, or whatever his title was, kicked the number one player in the world, Djokovic, out of the country. The day he was supposed to have his first match, he gets kicked out. So, I mean, the forfeit. I mean, can you imagine whoever was playing him in the first round, like how much they were sweating bullets of like, okay, I could either advance or lose. Advance or lose. I mean, so that politician was like that guy's hero, and and of course with the purse payout, there's no telling how much money. Like he may have his first opponents or whoever's like in his bracket, they were probably like bribing the politician. Like, listen, okay, there's some money in it for you if you will just kick this guy out. Give me a chance. And I would also say that given the fact that right after this, the French passed their law and then also basically informed Djokovic that he wouldn't be allowed to come to the French Open. I think there must be like a cascade of bribery that's going around the world. So I can only imagine what the next, like every tennis event that Djokovic is like currently signed up for is probably gonna, there's gonna be crazy laws that are gonna be passed in any moment now. But anyway, enough of my tangent. Okay, so Jungle's been being very patient. What's up, Jungle? How you doing? Welcome to the stream. What are your thoughts? And then when you get done, Jamie, we'll hear from you.
What's up? I had something I wanted to run by some people or you guys. It's pretty much well established that the rate of time and the measure of distance is variable, right? Because I just had somebody tell me that time is constant in text.
Okay, I'm not a physicist, but I'm pretty sure it is fairly well established that time passes differently at different altitudes. Am I right on that? I'm thinking.
There's some evidence for that.
Different speeds, yeah.
In fact, everywhere time runs at different rates. But then again, when we go to measure the speed of light, how do you measure the speed? You measure it with it's like your reference frame. You measure it with time and distance, right?
And the speed of movement and your reference frame. And you're comparing two reference frames. Time can flow different from the two reference frames depending on how fast somebody's moving in one of the reference frames or standing still in another. Then time flows at a different rate.
Thank you, Jamie. That made a lot more sense than the way I said it.
Right. So, this distant starlight thing, some people say there's a one-way speed of light, but there's actually, I don't even think we need a one-way speed of light because I'm pretty sure that in outer space, away from galaxies, because we're in a galaxy, but if you get away from galaxy, I'm pretty sure that time is running at a much faster rate. And so the billions of years are running by at a faster rate, which just cracks me up.
Yeah, I've always wondered what the how exactly that would work if you're going to say the whole universe is a certain age, like from what reference frame? God's reference frame?
Exactly.
I mean, I don't understand it totally how that would work, but it seems like something's weird with that, if considering relativity, right? Especially if you have like an expansion that's potentially faster than the speed of light itself. Something about that just seems, I don't know.
Yes, especially because time runs at different rates everywhere you are. There's a different rate of time. So how time itself is a fabrication. That's the result of the mass in the vicinity. And how can you estimate an age of the universe when there's no single rate of time in the universe to begin with? I mean, it's all a fabrication anyway. But anyways,
well, all that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think all that though, with the reference frame and the different rates of time, would actually be a result of the idea that there's a speed limit for that's constant for the speed of light. So I think that's part of the reason why it has different rates, though. So I don't totally understand.
Well, there's, I mean, this with the speed of light, it's always 186,000 miles a second, and we've been hearing that ever since I was a kid, at least. It's 186,000 miles a second. And then I just had somebody tell me in text that time is constant, and it is. I mean, because sure, it's 186,000 miles a second, but your second runs at different speeds, different rates, and your distances are different measurements too. So in outer space, it's going to be running at a faster rate of time. So most of the distance that the starlight is traveling, it's running at a faster rate of time. So it's not running at our rate of time to arrive, to get here. So that's probably why we can see the lights from the stars. And I don't know why I would be the only one to notice that. I mean, I'm basically a flunky from the Amazon, and I have to see this, and nobody else can talk about it or explain it. It's just kind of funny.
Well, anything that doesn't fit in with the conventional standard paradigm just gets ignored. I mean, even though there's all sorts of people like, yeah, they publish little, alternatives and such, and then, it gets crushed and nobody addresses them because it doesn't fit in the standard model. I mean, it's just, that's the reality. I would be surprised if there hasn't been a plethora of people have considered these kind of things, and then it just, well, I know that's got to be wrong, and then go on the next path. Or I would never get, I would never get that published, so I'm not going to pursue it. I mean,
right. And why would this guy tell me in text that time is running at a constant rate when everybody knows it doesn't?
Well, probably from a certain reference point, it would seem to be that if the speed of light is a constant. But I think the idea that the convention of the one-way speed of light is that the fact that is a convention does leave the door open in a way we maybe can't understand, but the light speed is not the same in both directions. It could have a preferred way of traveling in some way we don't understand. I don't know, dimensionally even. I don't even know how that would work, but the fact that we cannot, it's not possible by like definition. The way relativity works is the case. So it's just kind of interesting. It happens to be the case.
It's kind of hard to understand the one-way speed of light, but I can understand the time running at different rates. I mean, it's obvious that time slows down when you go near large, massive objects. So the converse is true too. When you go into outer space where there are no galaxies, of course time is running at a faster rate. And billions of years are running by, at a faster rate in the same amount of time what we would consider to be
Well-
6,000 years.
Well,
It's
presumably it's the
probably the
warping.
better explanation. Go ahead.
I think though, like the idea that mass, large amounts of mass slows down time is just because it's literally warping space, and then so it's like pulling it down or whatever, so to speak. And so
Well, that
the
is
constant speed of rate though is through the vacuum of space where there wouldn't be a gravitational, like lensing going on or whatever they call it.
right. That is the dilation of space, is the slowing down of time and the shortening of distance, which is verified, by the way. Anyways, you know, they just with the interferometer, they verified and validated relativity with the neutron star collisions, where they detected a difference in the distance, and then they triangulated everything to figure out where it was in space. They told everybody to look in space, and they saw the neutron star collision, which validates the gravitational waves. You know, the variability of
They
distance.
see the lensing; it makes like a lens in space, and they've even detected planets near, that they wouldn't normally be able to see, because it literally blocks the light.
That's what makes the lens, is that you have like a speck of matter in one place that's warping the space, that it makes an actual lens. It makes an actual lens, just like a lens that you would look through, a glass lens, where light slows down going through the lens. Light slows down going by a large massive object just the same. That's why you have a lens effect. It's the exact same thing.
Jungle. Some of the stuff you're talking about sounds similar to a model that Russell Humphreys proposed, 15, 20 years ago now. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of his model. Maybe somebody else can, but his model, I think, was the slowing down of the rate of the speed of light. It's not that light slows down.
I think the book is called Starlight and Time.
It's always going 186,000 miles a second, but relative to us, it is slowing down. It absolutely is. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gravitational lensing.
Well, okay, no, I think Humphrey's model was something about time passing more quickly outside. It might have been. I don't remember what it was.
It's the Earth. The Earth would be the center of an actual three-dimensional universe, and then being in the center, it would be in a gravitational well where time wouldn't pass as the time outside the universe. And it's like kind of like the diagrams are really cool because it shows the Earth like sinking below that certain line in this gravitational well in the center of the universe.
Yeah, he was talking about a white hole is what that is, instead of a black hole. Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, Redefined Living has the name of the model in the chat. Thank you, Redefined Living, for coming up with that. Again, I know next to nothing about physics, so I am not in any way commentating on whether Humphreys is right, wrong, or completely indifferent. I don't know. But it sounded similar to something else you were talking about, so I thought I'd bring it up.
Well, I mean, absolutely. That's what it says right there, called starlight and time dilation, because it can't be running at the same rate. Yeah, I mean, who went out into outer space to measure the rate of time and compare it with the rate of time that we have? Nobody, as far as I know. But that's probably, would rectify all these problems with dark matter and dark energy, all that stuff, the expanding universe probably would straighten out all that mess as well. Yeah, time dilation, exactly.
Does it rely on white holes being a thing, his model? Is that what someone said?
I thought it was. I thought it relied on a white hole being a thing.
There
as far as
was a
creation.
white hole cosmology, but I don't know if this is the same one. I'm not an astronomer. The only stars I see are when I bump my head, so I just don't. Sorry.
Well, it just makes no sense to me to say the universe is 13.7 billion years old when we know that time's not running the same rate in outer space. So the starlight, and there's nothing between us and the stars that we're seeing. So that means there's nothing to slow down the time between that star and here. Most of the trip is running at a faster rate of time. So billions of years are passing by at a faster rate of time than our 6,000. Probably that's what's happening. Which would be hilarious. But yeah, I don't trust the the speed of light being the same rate in outer space is what we have. We're inside of a galaxy. We're close to the Sagittarius A and probably other massive objects too.
I personally don't have any issue with the speed of light being what we view it as. I would question whether or not, until the wave function collapse takes place, that time has any relevance to it at all. And
Yeah,
if it's just the probabilities of what could be, then why would we argue that that would be bound by time? And the so it's like it's not that it wouldn't take the time that we calculate it to take to travel that distance if it was bound by time while it was
right.
If it didn't actually collapse, if it was just the probability until we observe it, right, until the actual collapse happens. And then what we're actually observing is retrocausality of the pathway, like it's now being, not rewritten, but like now collapsed into our frame. That yes, it would have taken that long, and we're observing that it did, but it actually collapsed, and now we're seeing everything that happened in order for it to do so. And it's like that's a mental pretzel you have to like think through right there, right? But that's exactly what we observe in experimentation. So we're seeing it on the finite, micro level, but there's no reason that the same logic wouldn't extrapolate out onto the macro level.
Yeah, because it's a fabrication to begin with. Time is a fabrication to begin with. That's the whole point. How can you have a creation, where the time itself is a fabrication? And how can you measure distance especially when there's no single rate of time to begin with?
So I think Wesley and Landon have been pretty quiet. You guys have anything you want to bring into the conversation?
Well, I've just kind of been listening. I kind of jumped in. I followed at the beginning, but then I had left, had to go do something. So I just kind of came in late. So I was just kind of listening to what everyone was saying. I was thinking about what you guys were saying earlier about the junk DNA. I remember I've been in this, discussing these things for a while. I remember when I was in 2015, I had taken a chemistry class, and this is something I thought about earlier because you guys were saying, people are saying now it's probably not junk. And I had I was looking in the textbook one day, and there was a little entry. I don't know what chapter it was, but this wasn't a creationist book. They were admitting though, most of this probably is not junk. So they've been admitting it for a while, but I think some people might be hesitant to say it when it's in a way that's not subtle, because I might kind of conflict with some of the assumptions people have. But that's what I was going to say. I thought about that when you guys were talking about the junk DNA, but regarding the time and everything, I don't really have a lot to say about that right now. But I just think it's interesting how they'll admit it sometimes, what seems obvious, but in a more subtle way. They won't come out as boldly and say it sometimes, it seems like.
Well, yeah, and it's to support your kind of the point you're making there. Emery, I think I mentioned this paper to you earlier. I forget what it was, but like this was in Nature. Let's see, December 2019. So year not that long ago. Less than, what is that, a year and 2 months total?
It feels like it was 10 years ago, John.
Well, true. But this paper is literally titled "Overcoming Challenges and Dogmas to Understand the Functions of Pseudogenes." I mean, it's like pseudogenes are defined as regions of the genome that contain defective copies of genes. They exist across almost all life forms, and in a million genomes are annotated in similar numbers to recognize protein coding genes. Although often presumed to lack function, growing numbers of pseudogenes are being found to play important biological roles. In consideration of their evolutionary origins and inherent limitations in genome annotation practices, we posit the pseudogenes have been classified on a scientifically unsubstantiated basis. We reflect that a broad misunderstanding of pseudogenes, perpetuated in part by the pejorative inference of the pseudogene label, has led to their frequent dismissal from functional assessment and exclusion from genomic analysis. With the advent of technologies that simplify the study of pseudogenes, we propose that an objective reassessment of these genomic elements will reveal valuable insights into genome function and evolution. I mean, it's like, that's, correct me if I'm wrong, Emery, but that's rather strong language for a academic paper.
Yeah, generally speaking, academic papers want to be a little bit nicer, unless they really don't like the person they're writing about, because they're trying to sound professional and intelligent. But that was pretty strongly worded. You will see stronger wording at times, but that wasn't soft.
Yeah, they weren't holding back on the fact that, like, hey, the proof is in the pudding. Like, we are now discovering function. Therefore, what the heck are we acting like this doesn't have any relevance? I mean, it's, and as you know, I mean, some of the stuff that they've there was another paper that was even more strongly worded. I'll see if I can find it again. But it was on the this was in relation to quantum function related genes and or biological components. And some biochemist, I forget this guy's name, I'll see if I can find the paper again. But he basically said, and not just basically, I mean, he said something to, if I'm paraphrasing slightly, but it was pretty close to this. It's like, so when are the old guard going to frickin' die? So they'll stop blocking research into quantum function, because for decades and decades, it had been the dogma. There was no possible way there could be any kind of quantum coherence at, in a wetware room temperature setting. Therefore, any suggestions to that effect were completely dismissed by all the, old guard, and are still doing it to this day, even though we now have it. It's now proven beyond all doubt that there's quantum function that's happening in biological systems, and they're still getting in the way of research down that pathway. And I mean, I forget the exact wording, but it was pretty close to like the, when are these guys going to retire, basically, and are we gonna have to wait till they die to be able to go and like expand this arena of research? And I really wonder how much that concept is applicable to all sorts of fields of science, just with how stringent the central dogmas have become.
That seems to be a pattern that I've noticed, especially with regards to like people calling for an extended evolutionary synthesis. You have people that are so opposed to that for really no other reason except that it upsets the long-held dogma, really. These people aren't creationists that want to modify it, but it seems like people take so strongly to it. They don't like that. It just seems like, it's kind of funny how you have this view. I've heard people say, like on Facebook and the groups I'm in, they'll be like, well, scientists, they love having their theories disproven. They like having their ideas challenged, and they like, change in the consensus. And obviously that's not the case for a lot of areas, at least. There's a lot of people that I think they get so stuck on an idea on how they think something is that, they don't want to be wrong, really. They want to still kind of have the high ground in that regard. So that's just something I noticed. I did a video though related to that topic. You're mentioning other fields of science, and I was just discussing why it seemed like people were hesitant to give up neo-Darwinism. And but yeah, I mean, that does seem like it's a problem in a lot of scientific fields, though. It's just something I want to share.
You're right, Landon. And this is something even the scientists themselves acknowledge. It's outside of just Darwin, the concept of arguing about Darwin and so on. Some scientists said something along the lines of this, and I can't quote this, and it's midnight, so bear with me. But basically, what he said was, scientific revolutions proceed as the old guard dies. It's essentially
that sounds right to me.
Yeah, I mean, as the older generation dies off that's set in their ways, then the new ideas get accepted. Unfortunately, but that's human nature, right? No one wants to admit to being wrong. Like, doesn't matter which side you're on. Nobody wants to admit to being wrong. And for a scientist who has spent hundreds or thousands of hours in the lab working on idea X, and he thinks that, oh, I've got it. And then maybe when he's 60, 70 years old, a paper comes out and blows his whole thesis out of the water. You think he wants to say that he wasted his life? Nah. That's why it's so hard to get new ideas out in science for a couple of reasons. One of which being the old guard is entrenched at the universities, which is where you pretty much have to be to do research. And B, the old guard controls the editorships and the of the major journals and the reviewers and so on. So even if you just completely throw the whole creation evolution thing out and ignore it, just pretend that's not even an issue. If you come up with a new great idea and you're 35, wait till you're 60, then publish it. You might have a shot.
Yeah, that's in no way, shape, form, or fashion could that possibly be limiting innovation. There's just no way. Anybody who says otherwise is just a naive fool who doesn't understand how things work. Okay, and you know what? Unless you have a PhD after your name, I don't really think you can have an opinion about this. Like, there's no way you can actually do an analysis of, what people talk about all the time and has been proven beyond all doubt historically. Nobody. I mean, how dare you? How dare you, layman?
I mean, I just saw an article about this on, I think it was Retraction Watch today, where they're not Christians, they hate creationists, but they were talking about how most funding for grants and so on goes to researchers who are above 40. And like anybody who's under 30, well, under 40, they're expected to slave away in postdocs until they hit the right age, and then they're allowed to maybe apply for a professorship, and then they got to wait till they're 50 or 60 to actually get into the guild enough to have their ideas be acceptable.
Well, of course, what's very ironic about that is we're talking about the most aware institutions in the world. I mean, they're all about non-discrimination and inclusion and diversity. Totally. And yet, oh wait, I think I hear lots of pontifications about like the heredity of capitalism and their slave labor and how they take advantage of people. However, it's well known that for well over a decade, grad students and postdocs are treated almost like slaves in the lab. I mean, just doing the bidding of their professors, whatever whims and wishes are in order to help, substantiate and expand their little fiefdom. I mean, but no. There's no feudalism inside of academia. None at all. No. It's pure democracy, folks. Pure, unadulterated democracy in modern academia. Man, you know what? It's kind of fun. I'm having so much fun being extraordinarily sardonic tonight. It's coming too easily to me right now. I don't know what's up.
Yeah.
You guys been paying attention to the James Webb Space Telescope?
I keep seeing headlines, but I haven't really paid too much attention to it.
Yeah, me either.
But it arrived at the L2 Lagrange point, so it's basically got a few months to cool down, and then it'll be making observations. So I'm excited about that. Been waiting on that since I was in like the 6th grade.
Yeah, I've seen some news about it, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's strange to me that they only can see things in infrared light waves.
Yeah, the way I understand it, the further light travels, the further its wavelength stretches. So they were looking back in time as they're thinking.
Yeah, I know.
With the gold coating of the mirror.
But there's so much stuff to see that we could see in more detail, and it just seems like a waste to me. I mean, maybe they'll find something. I don't know. They're expecting to find something really big. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's not just looking for one thing. It's going to be doing some cosmology stuff, but also some exoplanet type research. That's what I'm most excited for.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about exoplanets. I don't think. I mean, if we can't even reach the planet, what good is it anyway? I mean, unless you think you can get there.
Well, I don't care if we ever get there or not. I just want to know if if there are other planets similar to Earth out there.
Yeah,
That would be
Well,
interesting.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there's nothing out there similar to Earth. I wouldn't be surprised.
There are a few that come close already.
Yeah, there might be something similar. I mean, then again, so Jesus said he's going away to prepare us a place. So you never know, right?
Could be. But they can look at the atmospheres of the planets with James Webb with spectroscopy. So maybe you can tell if there's some kind of life on it, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, if they detect methane, but they're assuming that methane would be biologically caused.
Yeah. If you find ozone or let alone CFCs or something, that would be another thing, though.
I found it kind of interesting in the debate tonight that Matthew was totally fine with panspermia. And he said, there's all these planets, therefore, mathematically it can be accounted for. When, number one, I believe the latest estimate is that planet Earth is 1 in 400 quadrillion. So that kind of limits things just a smidge. But moreover, the improbabilities for life to come up are not so. Even if there are billions and billions of Earth-like planets, you still don't overcome the improbabilities. I guess that doesn't even remotely solve the problem. And in fact, if there was life on other planets, that would actually be, in my opinion, would make it more indicative of. Oh, so there are two things. Either one, formation of life is way easier than we think it is, which all the evidence says is not true, or that would actually be more indication of there definitely being an intelligent agent if the improbabilities were able to be overcome in a plethora of places. And
the way I see it, whether or not there's a God, I think life is going to be somewhere else in the universe. I think God would have created it in other places too, or it would have come about naturally in other places as well.
So, Jackson, if we were actually supposed to be immortal,
mm-hmm.
Is the size of the universe have any relevance? If the rest of the universe was empty, right, other than us, right, but we were immortal, would that have any significance, or would it actually make sense?
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really matter how long you live. You're never going to get 13 billion light years away, really.
Okay, hang on. You just said it doesn't matter how long you live. I said that we're immortal, so time is not relevant. So if you're immortal, time is not relevant, correct?
Yeah, I guess not.
Okay. And then there are all sorts of hypotheticals. If we have enough energy, if we could do this, if we could do that, then theoretically we could bend space-time, and then distance wouldn't really have much relevance, right?
Not at that point, no.
Okay, so again, if we're immortal and those things are possible, is it reasonable to conclude that it's like within the realm of possibility that we might be able to figure out how to do that? that fair?
Sure.
Okay, so if we did do that, and distance is no longer relevant, and we're immortal, would having a universe to explore suddenly have way more relevance?
I think it would, but it would take just a ridiculous amount of time to explore everything.
Right, but you're immortal.
Right.
So time is not relevant.
Yeah.
So you do realize that you're viewing all this through a finite frame of reference right now, because we have a very short span. Best case scenario, we're going to make it to 100, 100 or something, right?
Yeah.
But if like the premise of going, and again, this is like my first point of like, if we solve, okay, think about this for a second, okay? If humans were immortal, right, we're not going to die, then would Leonardo da Vinci still be alive today, number one? And number two, could he have been collaborating with Newton and Einstein and Bohr and all those other men? And do you think that if all of those geniuses were able to continue to collaborate together for hundreds of years, thousands of years, what do you think those guys might have figured out quantum mechanics? Like, let's say Da Vinci and Newton. Do you think if they had 500 years to work with, they might have figured out quantum mechanics?
They could probably reconcile relativity and quantum mechanics. Yeah, I would think they could.
Right. So if they were able to pull that off, is it within the realm of possibility they might have also like solved, and men of that type, right? Geniuses of that type would have probably figured out like fusion by now. Because we know it's possible, right? Because we see it in the sun every day, right? Yeah. We want to figure out how to contain it, right? With that kind of genius, do you think that they might have overcome the morons in the 1970s who stopped the production of nuclear-powered spaceships?
Well, even the Orion type thing. I mean, there was another thing called Orion, but there was
well, we've just rekindled the project that was in this. They actually had a prototype in the late 70s, and that particular like the speed of those would make traveling to Mars like a 6-week endeavor.
I know what you're talking about now. Yeah.
But my point is, we had prototypes being built for that 50 years ago, right? And then it got shut down. So the point where I'm going with all that is, let's assume that shutdown didn't happen, right? We would currently be mining the asteroid belt at this point, right? We would probably have set up a colony on the moon by now. Would the whole premise of going to Mars would suddenly be like, I mean, think about it, if it's a 6-week trip to Mars versus months and months and months, like, and depending on when you start and it's the closest time, all kinds of stuff. Like, I think the fastest you can get to Mars is like what, at the current speeds, is like what, I think almost 6 months, and it could be up to 9.
Yeah, it's about 6.
Between 6. Yeah, between 6 and 9, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, my point is that speed and the time requirement magically changes our perception of things, right? Yeah. So think back, not that long ago, when the premise of driving, the premise of traveling from, New York to LA was either a, couple month, at least a month of driving, if you couldn't fly, because most people didn't fly back then, right? Or 150 years ago, it was taking a year to go across on a freaking wagon, like all these things change. But then humans try to act like, oh, well, there's no way there could be another frame of reference to all this, because right now we can't solve X. Yeah. And anyway, so my very long-winded diatribe here is in the context of, whenever I hear atheists talk about like, the universe is so big, why would it be empty? Why would God do all this kind of stuff? It's like, well, if we were supposed to be immortal, this would be the ultimate playground. And the premise of figuring all this stuff out and how to solve these problems and, go and like terraform planets and all that kind of stuff, that's pretty freaking exciting. Like, you wouldn't want to just stay on one planet. You would want to go elsewhere. Yeah. And you'd be creating a whole, landscape for, exploration and investigation. But then because we're currently, bound to, 70, 80 years, humans will be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I disagree. Anyway, enough of my tangent.
Yeah, even if people live forever, I don't know if you're ever going to get the cost of space travel down far enough to make it feasible to go to like another star. That would be my next hang up with it.
Well, if I figured out how to create wormholes and we
Yeah,
conquered
you can do that.
fusion,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Did you never watch science fiction movies and shows and like read books on sci-fi?
I don't really do sci-fi that much, no.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so sidebar. I wonder if I've actually contemplated this, what I'm about to say, quite for years now. So I have always been fascinated by the difference, very regular difference between the perception of people who liked sci-fi and fantasy and all that kind of stuff as kids versus those that did not.
I like
Because
Star Wars and stuff like that, but I never really read any sci-fi. Like I'd watch movies. That's about the extent of it.
okay, so I read just ridiculous amounts of books as a kid, but when it comes to sci-fi, when I look back on that whole time, then reading all the science fiction of stuff that the vast majority of it is things that don't exist, right? So it forces your imagination to, come up with the mental images and the concepts and to be able to think about how the potential plausibility of all that and those kind of things, right? And it's my personal opinion that it enables you to have your mind to open up and to be able to consider things that might not yet be, but could be, and then think about the application of those things. And I find it very interesting just observing technology growth and all that kind of stuff, because a huge portion of the technology that we currently enjoy were conceptual idea, things that were made up in decades, if not over a century ago, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that H.G. Wells and all that kind of stuff that those guys came up with. Not only did we come up with those ideas and eventually turn those ideas into reality, we've surpassed them dramatically, right? Same thing with other than teleporters and faster than light spaceships, pretty much all the technology from Star Trek has been completely both accomplished and obliterated, right? From the original Star Trek series. And then pretty much everything except replicators, teleporters, faster than light, and holodecks, even though we're working on holodecks, have been accomplished, right? And anyway, my point is that I really feel like, I talk about this all the time, I really feel like atheists just put themselves, and materialists put themselves in a ridiculous mental box, and it truly prevents you from contemplating how incredible the universe is, number one, and the potential, number two. And then again, number three, if the Bible is true, if what was stated originally is correct, then a lot of the stuff that we observe, at least to me, makes a lot of sense and actually provides a very interesting thing to contemplate in relation to what is next, right? So if there is basically the equivalent of a new universe created, then all the bad is removed, and we now have what was originally intended. And let's say I'm no longer bound by the constraints of space and time. Man, my eternal existence sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, it would be.
I'm pretty impressed at what the pre-flood world was like, because everything was bigger and stronger, lived longer, and it must have been an awesome creation when it was first made. And to me, I don't have any problem seeing the pre-flood world as a fact. To me, it's obvious.
Yeah, for me, it's a leap, but I respect your opinion.
Yeah, because I know that human history only goes back to the ancient civilizations, which are the great grandsons of Noah. There is no other history except for the history of the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah. That's it. This goes back 5,000 years, and that's it. It's gone. Nothing.
Yep.
That's pretty
Wesley,
amazing.
Wesley, do you have something you want to say?
No, not really. Not really right now.
Okay. No, I thought so. You go off mute, and I was like, maybe you had something to say. Okay, so guys, I think we're gonna go for like another 15 minutes, and we'll call it a wrap. Anybody who's in the side chat, if you want to come in and air your thoughts, link is pinned at the top. So come on if you have anything you want to say, and then so we'll probably wrap up here in about 15 minutes. I'm determined in 2022 to do more shows, but to not kill myself and do ones till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Nice.
I'm not saying much, but I'm still having fun. I think we should go a while longer.
No, it's been good conversation. But yeah, last year I had the tendency of, starting these things at 9:30, and then me passing out at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes letting them go, and you waking up to you guys still talking. So it's got to be more controlled this year.
Yeah, I guess no one's gonna watch that back all the way.
Well, I don't care about people watching them all the way through. It's more just my own sleep deprivation was getting kind of ridiculous.
So, Jungle Jargon, I hear you have a debate with Gavin in almost a week or so, right?
He's still on mute. I don't know if he hears you or not.
Jungle, did you hear what Wesley said? Do you have a debate with Gavin? He must have dropped off.
He's having some technical difficulties. He's going on and off.
Oh, gotcha. Wesley, do you happen to know what the topic is?
Yeah, I think it's simply like YEC versus OAC or something like that.
Oh man, that's guaranteed to be a dumpster fire.
Oh yeah.
Gavin and Jungle. That is gonna be a good one. I may have to watch that for sheer entertainment. Just like oh man.
What
Jungle's
channel is it gonna be on?
I'm guessing
I think Praise.
Yeah.
Oh.
But Jungle is just gonna be doing a gigantic haplogroup mental
exposition
dump. Yeah, on Gavin. Gavin's not gonna understand a thing that he's talking about, and it's gonna turn into heretic accusations. Oh man! And then the after show, the reviews are gonna be hilarious. I mean, welcome back, Jungle. Did you hear what we were talking about?
Yeah, it's supposed to be the 31st Monday. I think that's what it is, right?
Okay. Yeah. Monday is the 31st. Yep. Did you hear?
I think
did you hear what I was
around
saying,
8
Jungle?
o'clock or something. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I mean, they I don't know why they went old Earth all of a sudden, but or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But it's pretty funny. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
Is Praise old Earth now, or is he not? Is he still young Earth?
It seemed like he was old Earth because he was asking me. He was asking me why do you have to have a young Earth?
Praise is a pretty strong gap theorist advocate.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, Praise is also a very strong flip-flopper.
He's all over the place.
I've noticed that.
So now, in fairness to him, I agree with you, Wesley, that he has been much more of a gap theorist for the majority. He's held to the gap theory for the longest of the other positions. Now he's pivoted quite a bit, but you're right. He's definitely been a gap theorist for quite a while, and he also gets into some previous age stuff sometimes too. So anyway.
I want to debate Kent Hovind for a 5th time.
You are?
I want to. He's kind of booked up here recently.
I tell you what, it cracks me. Atheist and evolutionarist obsessions with Kent Hovind crack me up. It really is funny.
Yeah, I mean, he's not such a bad guy, really.
Yeah,
What kind of
I don't.
topic would you want to do next?
I think we have a mutual respect towards each other. I think he kind of knows who I am at this point. I'm not, insulting him in every debate like most people do.
Yeah, you guys have a topic you had in mind, or do you have a topic in mind for the 5th debate?
No, I'm still thinking of a few.
Oh, okay. I guess one good thing about Kent is that he's quick to accept debates. He doesn't turn them down. He likes doing them, so
Yeah.
pretty good.
I'm surprised David Neff is wanting to do it again.
It's
I didn't
kinda
actually see
hard.
that one.
It's kind of hard to explain where biology came from without somebody creating it. I mean, you have to go through a lot and assume a lot to have it make itself. And then, like Kent Hovind says, you need the universe to make itself too, and that's not possible.
Yeah, that's why I never rule out a God totally. Because there are a couple gaps we still don't know.
Well, I mean, information itself is the biggest problem, I think. Not to mention that everything is a working part. Every 20 of the most common elements are essential working parts in living organisms. You're missing one element, and you don't have life. Out of 20 of the most common elements, then you have to have it ordered. Has to have, the structure has to be there the same time as the information is there. You have to have the information to make the structure, and you have to have the structure to contain the information. And then you have to have male and female, So Kent Hovind is right.
Thank you, Hurricane Havoc. Yeah, Neff made a video on his channel. It's called Schooling Kent Hovind, which I thought was strange.
Well, I mean, Kent Hovind, of course, is old school, and he's not going to be up on the latest thing,
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's so funny about
it? Yeah.
One of the things I get so much entertainment from in relation to Neff, it's like he doesn't even realize when he gets obliterated. It's sad. I mean, you think you won, and whether or not you got some points in, or there was something that, dude, you sat there and insisted on definitions for basically the entire debate. You didn't win, bro. There was you didn't win. It's not even remotely. It's crazy. Let's see real quick. 400 years late. $5 super chat. Thanks so much. Says thanks LPP and all who are here. Appreciate the dialogue. Jackson, you're on the right track, bro. I stand by my word. Your DAL trip when you're ready.
Yeah, it'll have to be after this summer because I've got some legal issues I have to resolve. You guys want to know what they are?
Are you on probation?
I am.
Oh man.
But it's nothing major. It's I imported some Chinese giant salamanders into the country a few years ago.
Oh,
yeah.
You serious?
Yeah, I'm being serious.
No. I mean, I fully believe you. That sounds exactly like something I would expect from you. But they actually arrested you for that?
They didn't actually arrest me. They did charge me with 2 felonies. But they dropped one.
For importing salamanders.
Yes, they're on CITES endangered list, Appendix 1. So yeah, it's kind of a huge deal. You wouldn't think it would be, but it is.
So are those like, are you going to be able to like, is it going to be adjudicated to like once you go through your probation, will it be dismissed and all that kind of stuff? Or
I did a plea deal, or it would have gone to trial. That's how big of a deal it is.
Yeah.
So the sentencing is July.
Yeah, it is a big deal. I mean, even things like just chemicals or biological substances, you know, drugs and stuff like that are, you know, it's a big deal.
okay, this is good. This is good. Hurricane Havoc rolling on the floor laughing. I'm going to tell Ken Hovind to use that against you as an ad hominem in your next debate to prove evolution is false.
It's public record. There are tons of local news stories about it.
Oh my god. Okay, so you know what? The world that we live in is so ridiculous. Like, headline:
I mean, it's a weird headline.
Jackson or young man arrested for illegal importation of salamanders.
Yeah.
Like not fentanyl, not cocaine, not heroin. No. Oh wait, here it is. Maybe he did have some fentanyl. What was the other?
It made the story weirder. I had some. I had a green mamba, a gaboon viper, and some crocodiles also that were confiscated.
So you imported animals, and that's felony.
Well, those were I actually bought them here in the country, and it was legal. But the crocs weren't in my state anyway. But,
Greenie says, "What you in for?" Salamanders.
It'd be weird if I go to prison for this and have to explain it to everyone.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you know if this is like a? Can this be expunged at some point, like these felonies?
Nope. Never expunged.
Really?
Really?
That is. I tell you what. There are so many aspects of our legal system which I mean are amazing, and we're very lucky to have in some cases. And on the flip side, there's other things that are so dumb.
Yeah.
And it's just like, really, folks, you're going to make this what's it like, Class C or something? Class D felony?
Class D.
I actually know somebody or knew somebody that went to Brazil. He was like Hispanic or something, but he went to Brazil and he had like some kind of chemicals or potions or remedies, health remedies, and that he was trying to take out of the country, and he never left the country. He was still there. Never left.
Yeah. I guess our system's a little better than that.
It's a big, it's a big deal. Yeah. They make a big deal out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Local evolution proponent Jackson Rowe imports illegal lizards and attempts to disrupt ecosystem.
Trying to get them to evolve into something else.
Oh man, I'm sorry you're going through that, man. That sucks. That's
that's terrible.
I got a total of 7 of them into the country alive, and I was doing it for conservation because the Chinese keep eating everything. So, but the good news is they're in zoos now. They're at the Brookfield Zoo in Illinois. So they're gonna breed them there, I'm told. So mission accomplished, I guess.
Well, that's good. Okay, so what? Could you have proven that was what your intent was?
That's what I'm gonna say. It's sentencing. They don't care why I did it. I mean, the law is the law. But I'm gonna explain to them. You know, that's the whole reason I did it. Wasn't to make money. I lost money doing this. A lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm saying in the context of like if you'd gone to trial.
If I had gone to trial, maybe that would have swayed the jurors to go easy on me, but wouldn't have changed the guilty. I don't think.
Maybe, but I don't know. Those kind of things are. You might have been able to get like a lesser charge or something.
Maybe. Of course, it could have been a lot worse if I had gone to trial. That's what you don't want to risk.
Well, yeah, they always say that though. It's,
yeah.
They don't want to. They don't. I mean, think about that. That's like not a good news story for an AD, right?
Yeah.
I mean, or an ADA. Like local prosecutors go after conservationists trying to save lizards or salamanders from being eaten by horrible Chinese. I mean, like that's like that's not good headlines for the DA's office at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be an interesting one. I tell you what, that would be worthwhile to like become an activist for. Of like we need to go and like surround the courthouse and be like, save the salamanders, free Jackson Rowe. Save the salamanders, free Jackson Rowe. I mean, come on now, like this is
It's got a nice ring to it.
I know, right?
It does.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy.
What happened to the salamanders? They're in the Brookfield Zoo now. I got them when they were like that long. They confiscated them at that long. Now they're like this long. So they get up to 6 feet long.
Wow, 6 foot salamanders.
That's
that big. That's cool.
The Chinese eat them all.
Interesting. Well, that's so okay. So you pled guilty, and then you have to go before the judge for him to give you the sentence and everything.
Yeah, that'll be in July. It's kind of like the Tiger King. I like that name.
It kind of sucks how they make you wait so long. It's like I would hate having to wait that long. I just want to get it over with.
Yeah, I've been waiting since 2019.
Yeah, that'll be the terrible part for me is waiting.
Yeah.
Well, that might actually go in your favor since it's just been so long. They might like are you expecting like actual jail time or just more like 5 years of probation or something like that?
They're expecting probation, so or else I'd be really worried.
Well, that's understandable.
Yeah.
As I said, what are you in for? Salamanders.
Yeah. Probably be pretty popular in prison with that story.
Yeah. You're like, man, so
also I beat up a pedophile. I'll add that to the story to make me more popular.
Well, I don't know. With just the salamanders, you might also. I mean, you might actually become like a. They were like, man, look at this. They totally screwed this guy over, man. This is ridiculous. Yeah. Okay, so when I was in college, the one of the instances when I was an idiot and got arrested, they didn't let me make a phone call, and so I went from sitting in the drunk tank to walking down the hallway past the phones and being handed a jumpsuit, and I ended up in general population, right? And my sister was getting married. So I think it was Wednesday night when I got arrested. She was getting married Saturday, but of course, they had like all the rehearsals and stuff on Friday, right? So I'm in, Thursday afternoon is when this all starts, and so I'm getting put into general population, and there was not enough beds. I'm handed like a 1.5 inch thick mat to sleep on, and anyway, so I'm in there, and yeah, he's like, "What you in for, man? What's the problem?" And I'm like, "Man, I told him what's happening. Like, they didn't let me make a phone call, man. My sister's getting married. Like, it's ridiculous. My parents are gonna kill me when they find out that like I was sitting in jail when everybody's wondering where I'm at for the wedding, right?" Well, anyway, a couple hours later, I was asleep and I get woken up, and a couple of the guys they were in jail for however long. They had taken pity on me while I was asleep, apparently, and had like waited for the guard to come and had been like telling him what was going on. And then one of them runs over and wakes my ass up. I ran over to the door, like told the guard what was going on. I got to make a phone call. Like, please make a phone call. He's like, hold on. So I don't know, 20 minutes later comes back and, hey, all right, come on. So I like walked down, got to make a phone call, called the bail bondsman and told him what was going on. I'm like, look, I don't have anybody's phone number. I'm sitting in here, like, come and get me out of here, and I will get you the money and either somebody will sign it or I'll hand you the money for my bail, because it was like nothing. It was like $500. I mean, I'll go to the bank and get the money, like hand you cash, and you take me to my house. So an hour later, the bail bondswoman shows up, gets me out, drives me to my house, and then I realized I don't have my keys. They're in my car, which is in the impound. So I ended up breaking into my own house to be able to get everything solved with the bondsman. And yeah, it was a crazy experience on that one. I'm like, I can't believe this has happened to me. But and then I ended up getting the charges dismissed, which is hilarious. But very long story. But my short version is my sisters found out I had gotten arrested, even though I hadn't told them. They found out, and then forced me to tell my parents, or they were going to narc on me. So it turned into this whole like kerfuffle, and I finally had to admit my bad deeds to my parents the day before court, in which my lawyer got the charges dismissed, and I was so mad that they. I'm like, I'm gonna escape. I'm gonna get out of this one. My lawyers told me we're gonna win, and they still forced me to tell my parents. It was a very tragic day at age 20.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I wish I hadn't done that. It was saved a lot of. I mean, I'm kind of glad the salamanders are safe, but you know, it's not worth getting a felony over, I don't think.
Yeah,
Right.
I think they have a song like that, don't they? What was I thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Donnie, you still here?
He said he'll be back in about 10 minutes.
Man, I'm already 6 minutes past when I was gonna plan on ending. Donnie, get your butt back here. Man,
Yeah.
he broke his coffee IV again.
Yeah, I was wondering if he was still listening. I guess he was. I think he responded in the chat.
Yeah. Wesley, do you have something you want to say?
Maybe back on like the subject of like the original debate, like the term evolution, right? So here's the thing, it's like it's used to mean
Thank you, Hurricane.
like that species, all living things evolved from like a primitive life form, like a single-celled organism. And then there's also like the processes of evolution, like random mutations, natural selection, genetic drift, gene flow, like isolation, everything. And so I guess I feel like it's a bad apologetic for people like Kent Hovind to say that they're opposed to evolution, because I think it's too confusing of a mantra. Do you agree with me on that?
Well, if I could say one thing, I think that those are some great points, Wesley. But Kent doesn't say he opposes evolution. He always makes it clear. Like today or tonight, I think he had such a good strategy because I think he said it a few times where he kind of pointed out that if by evolution you mean, micro evolutionary variation, or, the fact that dogs and wolves are related, he said, then yeah, that's empirical science. But if by evolution you mean cosmic evolution, planetary, stellar, organic, macro, then no, that's not something you accept. That's something you believe in. So Kent does make that clear that he's not against evolution as long as we're defining the terms correctly.
Standing.
He's always said it that way. Actually, he's always said it like that.
Listen, guys, I don't know if you guys missed the memo from Occult Nino earlier, but there is those other things that are being referred to. Those are made up. Those are
no
made up.
Evolution.
No, those are all made up by creationist scientists or creationist scientists.
Neil deGrasse Tyson didn't write a book with the term cosmic evolution on the title.
No. Listen, that was
It
when
doesn't exist.
that was when he was a brainwashed young Earth creationist. Okay, and then he, over time, when he went to college, he wrote that before he went to university and got his PhD. Okay, I know it says PhD, but that's actually retroactive. Okay. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, if I could actually, I was going to ask Jackson what I believe is a tough question for the evolutionists, but Wesley, if you wanted to, what are your thoughts on that, brother?
Yeah, I mean, if I can just push back on that a little bit, I still think I still think the terms micro and macro evolution are a little bit confusing because I don't think that the actual processes of evolution can get you to the theory of evolution, the modern synthesis. I don't think that the observable processes, for one, none of these processes are actually a mechanism that can get you like novel genetic material, right?
Right.
And so they don't have a process that can create anything. They only
they don't.
So the problem with using evolution is it gives too much credence to evolution when it's actually not that powerful of a mechanism, and it doesn't get you to the neo-Darwinism.
And that's why I
modern
wouldn't
synthesis.
even call it evolution. I don't call variation as variation. It's not evolution.
Well, I think you can call it evolution, but I think we need to make a delineation, and we need to make it precise so that when we're evangelizing to atheists or people who believe that evolution has this sort of power.
Right,
Well,
they call it that. They just say change. That's evolution, but no, that doesn't get you anything new.
Okay, but just let's say, for sake of argument, we just grant that change is evolution, right? It doesn't get you to common ancestry.
Right. No, it doesn't. It doesn't get you to universal common ancestry. It doesn't explain. It may explain the small scale variation, right? The type of, as we were talking about earlier, the microevolutionary variation, where we get the change in the frequency of the expression of different traits. Nobody disagrees with that. But the processes of natural selection, which is a fine-tuning mechanism, it selects from what's already there. And then they'll say that mutations are the originator of novel genetic variation that selection can act upon, but mutations are overwhelmingly deleterious, and therefore selection and mutations cannot explain, as Wesley's pointing out, the major innovations, phenotypic complexity, true novelties. Those mechanisms can't explain. So I would agree with that. If I could ask the evolutionists on the panel, not to put you on the spot there, Jackson, but the question I have for you is, actually, I'm going to share my screen real quick, if you could, Jim. And this will be good, because I'll ask you roughly the same question in our upcoming debate too. If we've been evolving for millions and millions of years, if we've been evolving from precursors, okay, when it comes to the origin of humans, the evolutionists will say, somewhere between 100 and 200,000 years. Before modern Homo sapiens, you got Homo erectus for millions of years worth of time. And you'd go back to Homo habilis, and then you'd go back to some Australopithecine ancestors, whatever. There's always precursors, right? The existing variety that we have in our DNA today, the evolutionists would say, go back in time. They're inherited from past common ancestors. So if mutations add diversity, Jackson, okay, because mutations are adding something that was not previously there. So they are adding diversity. I would say it's negative diversity. It's not beneficial diversity. But my question is, if for millions and millions of years, we have mutations that are being added to the gene pool and therefore adding diversity, why do humans today have extremely low genetic diversity, as in every single human being on the planet, no matter who you look at, is 99.99999% similar. Why is that the case if we've been evolving for millions of years? Yeah, go ahead, Jackson.
Well, in both of our models, however you look at the world, there was a bottleneck in the past. I mean, I say it's about 50 to 75,000 years ago, but you say it was much more recent. That's kind of a short answer, but that's basically why we would be so similar.
Okay, so your answer is the reason why we have such low genetic diversity. And I got a million slides here and I can't find the exact paper that I wanted to pull up, but that's fine. That's fine. So your answer is the reason why humans have extremely low genetic diversity today is because humans who at one time had high diversity went through a population bottleneck, which reduced levels of genetic diversity. Is that your answer?
Yeah, I think the population got down to a couple thousand, if I remember right.
Okay, so how long ago would you say this was?
50 to 75,000 years ago, I think I read.
Okay, so 50 to 75,000 years ago, humans enter a population bottleneck, a near extinction event.
Mm-hmm.
How long was this near extinction event?
That I don't know.
Okay, so right here, human genetic diversity is substantially lower than that of many other species. 0.1%, as in we are 99.999% similar. Same with the Y chromosome, right? Very low levels of genetic diversity in the Y chromosome. And here's a mitochondrial DNA phylogeny, mitochondrial DNA as well. So we have low diversity in the nuclear DNA compartment and the uniparentally inherited DNA compartments, mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosome. So you're saying humans entered a genetic bottleneck roughly 75,000 years ago.
Something
now,
like
the humans that entered that bottleneck, is it your position that they had high levels of genetic diversity?
Well, I would say they would have had higher genetic diversity, probably. Yeah.
Okay. But you don't know how long this bottleneck was.
They might have estimates for it, but I don't know personally.
Okay. So if this human population of, say, 2 to 10,000, I think you said, what, 7,000 it went down to roughly?
I think 2,000 was the number I read.
What's that based off of? Is that based off genetic data? Is that based off?
Genetic data from what I understand, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let me ask you then. So we have this human population that has high levels of genetic diversity. In order to get to the levels of diversity we have today, which is extremely low in, as you can see here, the mitochondrial DNA, only a few differences that separate any two people. Extremely low variation in the mitochondrial DNA and, amazingly, in the Y chromosome and the nuclear DNA. So for humans to get such low diversity from high diversity, you would need a prolonged population bottleneck because you would need probably thousands of years to reduce levels of heterozygosity, right? It can't just be a single generation bottleneck, right?
Yeah, I would think not.
Okay, so here's my main question then. Those are the lead-in questions. So if you have this human population then between 2 to 10,000 existing, let's say in Africa, for who knows, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 years, who knows, enough time to reduce levels of heterozygosity and increase levels of homozygosity, okay? Inbreeding reveals the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes. And according to the evolutionists, all genetic variation for the most part is the result of mutations over time. So we have thousands of years of mutations that are in recessive form coming to the forefront and manifesting themselves in disease and degeneration. So how in the world did this population of between 2 to 10,000, okay, that experienced a massive near extinction event, incredibly damaging genetically, suddenly spread out into all parts of the world, seizing dominion over the planet?
I'm sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Say that again.
Well, how did this extremely genetically compromised population of between 2 to 10,000, they've had thousands of years, let's say, of inbreeding. Mutations are coming to the forefront because that's what inbreeding does. It reveals the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes, leading to rapid genetic degeneration, mutation accumulation, rapid disease being manifested. But you're saying this is the population that suddenly spread out in all parts of the world, seizing dominion over the planet, eventually inventing computers, automobiles, the space shuttle. Can you explain how that's plausible and not just fairy tale?
Well, 2,000 is still a fairly viable population, viable enough to exist. I think zoologists say the minimum population is like 100 pairs before you get some severe inbreeding problems. So I don't think a 2,000 number it's enough to explain why there's low genetic diversity, but not too low to say why humans aren't just a mangled mess of inbreeding.
Yeah, but you're taking a population of 2,000 and you are keeping them at roughly 2,000, let's say between 2 to 10,000, since evolutionists have different numbers. I think Francis Collins says about 10,000. You're keeping them at this low number for thousands of years. So therefore you have thousands of years of mutation damaging inbreeding, which is revealing these mutations and degenerating the human population at that time. How's that even feasible? It's just a story. And you even said that the evidence is in our genetics. Yeah, what that means is the evolutionists see that humans have incredibly low genetic diversity, which is consistent with our model. God creates two people, Adam and Eve, just 6,000 years ago. Right off the bat, bam. You know, that limits genetic diversity. Turns out humans have incredibly low genetic diversity. It's exactly what we'd expect from the biblical creation starting point. And then we find that out through genetic data. The evolutionists, they say, wow, why is this the case? And then they build this post hoc, ad hoc story, this out of Africa population bottleneck, which, I mean, whether you want to admit it or not, Jackson, that would have been incredibly damaging to that population of, let's say, 2,000 for thousands of years. I mean, look at the cheetahs today. We have a known example today of an animal species that's in an extreme bottleneck. Cheetahs, they're down to like 7,000. Their sperm is degenerate. Conservationists are worried about them. Are cheetahs going to suddenly spread out into all parts of the planet, seizing dominion over the earth at some point, Jackson?
Probably not in their current state, no.
Exactly.
But that's
exactly
kind
my
of,
point.
That's kind of
so how did that human population in their state, an extremely genetically compromised state, suddenly seize dominion over the planet, spreading out in all parts of the globe?
Well, that kind of brings up another point: is why do all mammals, for example, have different levels of genetic diversity if they all came from a pair on the ark?
Well, for one, all mammals do not share a common ancestor, right? There are many, well, the separate ancestry model would suggest that there are mammal groups that wouldn't go back to a common ancestor. We'd have some special creations there. But for the most part, in the mitochondrial DNA, the CO1 gene, through these barcoding analyses, all animal species have low genetic diversity. And that's that Rockefeller study, that massive genetic boundary study, which demonstrated that over 90% of species today originated at the exact same time. So yeah, there is genetic diversity evidence, Jackson, that suggests every single animal on the planet went through a bottleneck, which we would say is the flood. We actually have a bottleneck that we could point that to. And then if you're talking about nuclear DNA diversity, well, yeah, there's going to be differing levels of diversity in the nuclear DNA based on the population histories of these different animal types that came off of the ark. Go ahead. I spoke a lot there, Jackson.
But yeah, there's another point too, is that humans and animals have different genomes, and they're not the same. The animals can reproduce from like two individuals and have no problem. Humans can't do that as well as a lot of animals. So you're comparing two very different organisms.
Well, and here's what's interesting, and I'd be curious as to your thoughts again, Jackson. Animals in general have higher levels of diversity. Humans have extremely low diversity. Well, that fits perfectly with our model because God creates two humans, Adam and Eve, and he creates populations of animals. So with humans, that limits genetic diversity. And with animals, that gives us the expectation that there should be higher levels of genetic diversity. That's exactly what we find. How do you explain that, Jackson?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a geneticist, so I don't have a great explanation for it. But like you mentioned, cheetahs, they were down to a few individuals like several thousand years ago, I think, and they're having all these problems now. But I mean, again, we're back to the flood issue of there were two of everything on the ark. So why isn't this a problem with all mammals and not just cheetahs?
Well, because not every single kind of animal that came off of the ark had the exact same population history. They all migrated to different parts of the world. They experienced different environmental conditions. It turned out that the cheetahs entered a bottleneck that's been extremely damaging, and they're down to 7,000. And as we pointed out earlier, their sperm's degenerate. Conservationists are worried about them. So that specific species within a kind, right? Because we would say cheetahs, tigers, house cats, lions, so on and so forth are related. But that one single species within the greater kind of, let's say, the cat kind, entered a bottleneck, and it's been extremely damaging to them. But that's what you say happened 75,000 years ago to humans.
Yeah, not on the same scale as the cheetahs.
I have an explanation for the cheetahs. A lot of people don't like it. I mean, I haven't heard it being widely accepted yet, but I believe that the cheetahs were domesticated by the Egyptians and then later re-released, and that's why there's such a bottleneck, is because they were domesticated and then re-released or escaped into the wild again.
Oh, that could certainly be the case. That's actually a good hypothesis, and that's exactly what I mean about different population histories, different environmental pressures. It's not like every single animal on the planet has experienced the exact same environmental stimuli or have had the exact same population history, right?
You guys heard of the Asiatic cheetah? Donnie, have you heard of the Asiatic cheetah?
The Asiatic cheetah?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
I haven't.
I think its population's like less than 100 right now, but they live in Iran and a couple places in Iran. They're really pretty. They're really pretty.
Yeah, which is it's not too far away, actually. It's really the same location. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just bring them up because I like them.
Yeah, so I guess to summarize my case here is I find it fascinating that from the biblical starting point, right? Because a lot of intelligent design advocates, they'll kind of just stick to the evidence for intelligent design, which is great because there's so much evidence for it. But then the critic or the evolutionists that they're debating or the atheists will say, well, how does that prove you're God? And that's where I take the next step and I say it's easy to demonstrate that the designer is indeed the God of the Bible, because it is the account in Genesis. It is the Bible that tells us it's the history book of the universe. And it's the Bible that tells us God specially created two people, Adam and Eve, just, a few thousand years ago. He created populations of animals that were created to bring forth after their kind. And this is all confirmed by the genetic data, specifically the mitochondrial DNA data, the Y chromosome data, levels of genetic diversity. Like, for example, that genetic boundary study, Jackson, have you had a chance to, I'm not sure if John's still there, but I can screen share it. I have it up on screen. If he's not there to screen share, that's fine. But here's some data on the massive genetic study in 2018, where they published and analyzed DNA of over 100,000 animal species.
Mm-hmm.
And even they admitted that, notice this, when the researchers extrapolated this data into time frames of origins, they discovered that about 90% of all animal life was roughly the same very recent age. So we have human genetic data that suggests low genetic diversity consistent with special creation.
Hey,
And then now we have
SFT, can I butt in? That just real quick on the cheetah thing. I did a lot of study on the cheetahs. Wild Animal Park in San Diego was my favorite place. So it's a refuge for cheetahs. And it came early on to me and my teams that it was actually the Babylonians that tamed the cheetahs. And they're actually a hybrid from two different cats, supposedly the jaguar and the leopard. And people say, oh, well, the jaguar is a Central American, cat. Well, they've been traveling, if you look at the Incan, the Aztecs and all that, their population, and what's his name from Answers in Genesis does this.
That's the same cat. It's the same cat.
Exactly.
The jaguar and the leopard are exactly the same cat.
Exactly right. One adapted to swim and the other one didn't. There are leopards that can swim, though, in Africa. So anyway, they domesticated them for hunting. They domesticated them for hunting.
Too.
All right. I'm on your same wavelength though.
I know.
It's just the answer that you get through, because if they say, hey, this was a cat that was bred purposely for its speed because it was called the hunting leopard. Okay, it's way faster than the regular leopard, and it could catch all the exotic other animals that were faster, an ostrich and other else, right? So in Babylon, they went through the whole thing. There's a whole, if you go to, I forget what website it is, but if you go to the website, they domesticated tons of animals because they wanted to sacrifice the pure animals. Okay, so what wasn't there, they threw it out into the wild. Okay, but after the Babylonian Empire, fell, it was basically all the Assyrians first, then Assyrians, Sumerians, and then the Babylonians. And after that went away, the Persians weren't really interested, because if you look at some of the things that King Solomon had, he had zoos, he had aviaries, he had what we have now, what we call zoos, from all the people and all of his wives that came from everywhere. I think it mentions in some of the annals about the Queen of Sheba, what she brought. It wasn't just money. It was exotic animals. And I think she was actually Ethiopian. I can't prove it, but that's what I think. So I just want to interject real quick on the cheetah. The cheetah was not on the ark, number one.
Right.
It was never on the ark. Okay.
Well, the jaguar and the leopard were. I mean, it's the same animal anyway.
Correct.
Well, you would have an arc. Well, you would have a cat archetype, and through their pre-existing DNA differences, you'd get everything from the lion to the jaguar to the house cat to the cheetah.
Okay, I used to breed.
I like the word archetype.
Yeah. When I was 9 years old, I used to breed hamsters and sell them for $4. Okay, I made money. When you're 9 years old, $4 is a lot, especially back in the day when I was 9. You could buy a lot of candy with that. So anyway, you go to the movies, do all sorts of things. So I could tell you, I could take 2 teddy bear hamsters today, and within the 4th generation, I can get a white, red-eyed hamster. Guarantee you. I'll bet you anything you want. I can do it today.
Well, and that's the thing about the design diversity hypothesis that young Earth creationists hold to for the most part, is the fact that today we know there's evidence that suggests genome-wide functionality. Okay. And that, as we demonstrated earlier with Andrew Cumming, he didn't know how to explain the existence of orphan genes, the existence of multifunctionality in a lot of these proteins and redundant elements and so on and so forth. So the evidence best fits within that created genetic diversity. Actually, Alec, if I could,
SFT, here's the other proof: the red heifer that they already have gotten ready for the 2nd temple or the 3rd temple. They've already got spotless red heifers from diverse cows. It's taken them a while. They couldn't get the spotless one. They finally got them, and they're interbreeding them. So I don't know how long that's going to hold, but I'll let you guys go discuss it. But Jackson, not every single animal that we have today on the planet, not my dog Raider, not my cat, we're not on the ark. Okay. And there were no There were no microbes on there. There was no bacteria. Not a single insect was on there. And this question about the bees, what did the bees do? Well, if you ever look at a beehive, throw it in the water one time, see what happens. It floats.
Ants too. Ants, yeah.
There you go. Never mind. Fair enough.
Those are some great points, brother. And it all circles back to this. And I'd like, Jackson, your thoughts, because the critics of YEC always repeat this argument that, well, the young earth creationists, they are incapable of drawing a line in ancestry, right? This phylogeny challenge, for example. And yet here we have so many lines of evidence, so many data points that suggest discontinuities. We see that in the fossil record, but this massive genetic boundary study, Jackson, I definitely highly recommend you look into it. And this is the only part I'll comment on right now. This is a commentary from Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins. The only historical record we have of a recent sudden origin of the diversity of life with distinct boundaries reproducing after their kind is in the opening chapters of the book of Genesis. Okay, so my question to you then, Jackson, is, you critics of young earth creation, you guys are always asking for evidence for, special creation, created kinds. You're always looking for us to answer the phylogeny challenge. I mean, here it is. Distinct genetic boundaries. All species today originating at the exact same time. 90%, that is.
Well, I remember.
What are your thoughts on that? Go ahead.
I remember reading something about this. I don't remember exactly what the argument was, but 90% of them have existed in relatively modern form for 100,000 years, something. But that didn't mean they originated then. I think it's what the argument was.
Well, yeah, no, and we wouldn't say that. We're saying that the bottleneck event that 90% of species originated from is the flood bottleneck. That's why it's 90% and not 100%, because you have archetypes, right? You have the cat archetype, the dog archetype, whatever. And from those archetypes, you get all the different species, which is easy. Just a single generation of recombination and gene conversion leads to novel chromosomal combinations simply because the DNA differences are built in from the start. So yeah, the animals today, the species today that came out of that bottleneck at the flood, they go back to precursors, obviously. They go back to the creation event a couple thousand years before that. So yeah, we wouldn't say this is the special creation event either, but this is evidence in genetics for the flood bottleneck. And over 90% of species today came out of that bottleneck. They admit this. Now they come up with some date, 100,000 to 200,000 years. That's not based on genetic data. That's not based on direct lines of evidence. That's actually based on the geological column, based on phylogenetic assumptions. So, but anyways, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's good evidence? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you know my opinion on the geologic column by now, I think.
No, I know, but not specifically the geological column, but this massive genetic study.
Oh, yeah, I would have to look more into it. Can't really comment much more on it. But yeah, I'll have to research it for our debate, obviously, or I'm going to be caught off guard.
Yeah, definitely do. Well, hey, let me ask you this then, just through what you know about the evolutionary model. What bottleneck, according to your evolutionary model, has over 90% of species coming into existence at the same time? Like, well, what bottleneck is that?
Well, it wouldn't be coming into existence at the same time, like we were saying earlier. It would just be
coming into existence from precursors.
There have been a lot of mass extinction events in the history of the world. Most recent one being the KT, whatever they call it, extinction. So I would think, Earth's population of animals gets reduced quite a bit, has to re-diversify, and that's the best way I can explain it.
But 100 to 200. So, for example, here, in a vain attempt to explain these anomalous results, the study authors speculated that somehow life got, because anything with the global flood, right? So somehow life got nearly wiped out across the board. Notice this. the Genesis flood, perhaps across the board about 100 to 200,000 years ago, and then had to restart. There you go, Genesis flood. You got a bunch of archetypes stepping off of the ark, and from them and from their DNA differences and migration, isolation, recombination, gene conversion, shifts from heterozygosity to homozygosity. You got all these new species. They come about quickly because the DNA differences are built in. Okay, we can explain all this. This is exactly what we would expect. But what massive near extinction event occurred 100 to 200,000 years ago, Jackson?
I'm not aware of one.
Yeah, me neither. Like, according to the evolutionary model, that seems.
There's another thing I
bizarre.
would like to point out too, is that from what I can gather is that the genetic diversity in the animals happened early on, right after the global flood. And to prove it, or to base it on, in other words, that there was one cat that came off the ark, and that's where all the lions and tigers and jaguars came from. And we know the cheetah came from the jaguars as a hybrid kind of thing, or a domesticated breed. But which I thank Alex Cox for that, because that fills in, what I didn't know about the cheetah, which explains a lot, that it was domesticated by Babylon. So that helps a lot. But the thing is that if you look at the Göbekli Tepe cat, you can't really tell me what it is. What kind of cat is it? The Göbekli Tepe cat, if you know what I'm talking about. It's not really a lion. It's not really a jaguar. It's not really any of those, variations, but it's a cat. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's an interesting argument.
Yeah, because that's what I observed. Because early on, both in animals and humans, there was separation into family groups, and the populations became fixed in their genetic variations, and they remained that way for hundreds of years. And to this day we have the different populations that that are according to their areas, geologic or geographic areas. But yeah, it happened both with animals and humans, because early on the Bible identifies the Cushite and the leopard as not being able to change the color of their skin, because their populations were fixed. The variations were fixed in and among themselves with the genetic diversity that they had. So that seems very obvious to me. And of course, going back to the Y chromosome, every ancient civilization, like the Assyrians, they have their own Y chromosome. The Assyrian Y chromosome is from Asher, who is, incidentally their god, Asher. He has the GY chromosome. So every descendant today living with a GY chromosome is descendant from Asher directly, male line descendant. And you can do that with every grandson of Noah, because Asher is a grandson of Noah. Gomer is R. Go on down the line. Elam is H. All the different ones. Tubal is K. All the Y chromosomes you can basically identify as to who they are, with a few exceptions which I haven't nailed down yet. But just about every Y chromosome, I could identify who your ancestor, paternal line ancestor is. And it only goes back 5,000 years or less, to Noah's grandsons. So go ahead.
No. Those are some good. Actually, I saw Wesley unmute. Wesley, go ahead, brother.
Oh, it's sort of off topic, so I'll just wait till this conversation's done.
Okay. I just had one last question since JJ brought up the Y chromosome, and a good point that Stephen Tibet said in the live chat, which I completely agree with, is it makes the most sense that God would have brought the most heterozygous, genetically diverse animals to the ark, right? With the greatest potential to diversify, adapt, and speciate after the flood. And remember, every single bottleneck in the biblical model was one generation. Okay, we had a bottleneck at creation with Adam and Eve. Then we had a bottleneck at the flood, and then we had a bottleneck at Babel. They were all one generation, and they were followed up by what? Rapid and exponential population growth, which means most heterozygosity would be preserved. You wouldn't have generation after generation after generation of recessive mutations coming to the forefront, leading to rapid genetic degeneration. No, but the evolutionary bottlenecks, they are always, as Jackson was answering correctly earlier, they are always prolonged bottlenecks, because they need prolonged bottlenecks in order to reduce levels of genetic diversity. But a prolonged bottleneck is always extremely damaging to the species. That's what we see in the cheetahs, and that's what would have been the case 75,000 years ago with humans when they were dropped to 2 to 10,000. Okay, it's not feasible. I'm sorry. It's a story. I've had this debate. I've had 94 formal debates. I've debated, PhDs on this, and they really never have a good answer to how this hypothetical population bottleneck 75,000 years ago would have been remotely feasible. That population of 2 to 10,000 would have been so genetically compromised that there's no way that they could have spread out in all parts of the planet, seizing dominion over it. But my question to Jackson, and Jackson, feel free to respond to any of that, of course. The Y chromosome, when they sequenced the Y chromosome of humans and chimpanzees, they were shocked. There's massive size differences, massive differences in gene content, massive differences in architecture. And they were shocked. They literally said, this is what we would have expected to find between chickens and, I think it was humans, chickens or T-Rexes or something, like that much difference. Now, they specifically were talking about the autosomes there, but I do have the paper that I can pull. I'll pull it up during our debate. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, and how do you explain those massive differences? I think it's only about 35% the same, the Y chromosome between chimpanzees and it should have been a lot more similar, is the point. Jackson, what are your thoughts, my good man?
Y chromosome, I'm not sure, but the coding regions for the DNA are all very similar, and of course, we share like 99.7% of our endogenous retroviruses, which I know you have an explanation for those as well. I forget what it is, though. But overall, we're very similar to chimps.
Well, we're not, though. That's the thing. When we consider protein coding, when we consider non-protein coding, when we consider copy number variation, size differences, overall architecture, when we consider everything, okay, humans and chimpanzees are only about 88% similar genetically. That's 400 million DNA differences. But here's the thing, the Y chromosome is non-recombining DNA. It doesn't have a counterpart to recombine with. Okay, so it should be relatively more stable than nuclear DNA, where you get two copies and they recombine, they exchange genetic information with each other every generation. So the Y chromosome doesn't do that. So it should be more stable, but yet it's the least similar. It's only like 35% the same when you consider everything. Well, I understand that you said with the Y chromosome, you don't know. So the point is, no, even in your nuclear DNA, it's only about 88% the same. So how do you fixate so many differences in just how long ago would you say the split was, Jackson? About 6 million years ago, 10 million years ago?
When I say 7 to 13.
Okay, so you have to fixate between both species 400 million DNA differences. Are fixation rates slow or fast, Jackson?
I would say they're not. Well, I would say it depends. I don't know.
I guess in a small population, fixation rates are going to be faster. But in a population of 7 billion right now, there's almost no mutations that are going to be fixated in the population. They're all going to be kind of done away with through genetic drift. But such massive differences in just 7 to 13 million years. I mean, you got to account for that, right? But the Y chromosome, that's one you definitely should look into, because that should have been the most similar, given the fact that it doesn't recombine. Even with a fast mutation rate in the Y chromosome, every single human being, every single male Y chromosome is nearly the same, nearly identical.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, SFT.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Because it's non-recombining, it should be identical. I mean, as far as structure is concerned, you know.
Right. Yeah. Because it's not exchanging genetic information with the counterpart. The mitochondrial DNA, same thing, non-recombining. There's no counterpart that the mitochondrial DNA compartment exchanges genetic information with. So it was really baffling to researchers when they sequenced the Y chromosome of chimpanzees, and they were shocked. I think the Y chromosome dissimilarity between chimpanzees and humans, I think that alone falsifies human evolution. Can't be true. There's no way to explain that amount of change in 7 to 13 million years. There's no way.
And we already know everybody stepped off the ark anyway, so, you know, case closed.
And we see that with the genetic boundary study. I mean, look at what they say. They're so baffled. They say, well, you know, somehow nearly all of life was wiped out and then restarted. And then they say 100 to 200,000 years ago, but they don't even give a reason why. You know, they don't give like some kind of event or anything in the geological record. They just say, well, it must have been 100 to 200,000 years ago, some type of near extinction event. We don't know what it was. We don't know what it is. It's like, it's all lining up so perfectly with the Bible. It's amazing.
And there's no calendar, there's no historical record, there's no genealogy of anything older than 5,000 years. And yet the Bible has genealogies and records going back 6,000 years. So what's up with that?
Right. Written records, 6,000 years. Mutation rate, 6,000 years. Genetic entropy puts shelf lives on genomes. We got the genetic boundary study. We got the Y chromosome dissimilarity, linkage blocks. I mean, if every single generation you got recombination and gene conversion, why do we have such massive linkage blocks still intact in the human genome, where it looks like there's been no shuffling, no recombination, no gene conversion? If we go back hundreds of thousands of years to millions of years, then the genome of humans should pretty much be completely scrambled to nothingness. But yet we got all these massive intact linkage blocks. I mean, how does the evolutionist explain that?
I don't know. I'll have to do some reading on that. The Y chromosome thing, especially.
Yeah, no, actually, I think this after show is good, Jackson, because these are the arguments that I'll be bringing up in our upcoming debate. So it gives you at least a chance to kind of look into them. And when it comes to whale evolution, Jackson, since that's your expertise, I'm going to look into that quite a bit and get some slides and stuff, and we'll give the audience a good show.
Okay, good.
There you go.
Also, I was watching one of your videos, Jungle, about like haplotypes and stuff. I think it's interesting that if you just look at a Y chromosome haplotype map, it like the diversity pretty much points to like a Middle Eastern area. It doesn't follow what you'd expect from like an out of Africa hypothesis.
That's right. That's right. If you look at how many people share the different number of Y chromosomes in the population, it's Uzbekistan is the highest, basically, as far as I can tell, the highest number of different Y chromosomes in one area, a single area. And that is definitely close to where the ark landed, yeah. And I noticed that too, because then on the extremities, like you go to England, there's a couple Y chromosomes out there. There's R, there's I, there's Q. And then you go the other way, it's O and Q and N and K and then you go the other way, and it's all E, A, B, A, B. Skip the C and the D because they went the other way. It's A, B, and E in Africa. Then the C and the D never went to Africa. They went east. And there was just so much information that corroborates known historical events. It lines up perfectly. More and more, the more I look at it, the more it lines up perfectly.
Yep. I was gonna bring up something. I'll send a link in the private chat. I found this article. It's kind of funny. It's called "Earth's magnetic field broke down 42,000 years ago and caused massive sudden climate change."
Oh, that would. Well, yeah, you might say that, but my belief is that the continents broke apart 100 years after the global flood, and they all slid north, and that's why you had the quick freeze in the Arctic. I mean, not the Arctic. Yeah, the Arctic in Siberia and in Canada. You have entire forests and animals and everything quick frozen because of the breakup of the continents 100 years after the global flood, where they all slid north, and India sliding north smashed into Asia at the same time, because India has glacial striations from south to north, and the only way it could get glacier markings from south to north is if it was on the South Pole, which it was at the time, along with South Africa, South America, Australia, Madagascar, and India. They all have, and they're all connected with sediment layers that connect them together, fossils connect them together, and then even living animals connect them together. In many cases, or some cases at least. But that's how I believe that the things were frozen quickly. It was at the 100 years after the global flood, at the breakup of the continents. Because the Bible says the earth was divided. People take it to mean that the people were divided, but I believe that it was actually the earth that was divided. The continents broke apart. And I believe that there's a lot of evidence to corroborate that. Considering that the lifespan was cut in half a second time at the time in the days of Peleg, too. There's a whole bunch of different things. The word divided in Hebrew means divided, but in the Aramaic it means as the waters flow, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've heard the I guess you could call it like a young age argument. Basically it states that the Earth's magnetic field decays.
Oh, at the time, yeah. At the magnetic reversals and stuff, that would have happened at the time of the breakup, I believe, yeah.
I think there's evidence to suggest that it happened during the cooling of igneous rock during the flood.
On the seafloor, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, after the flood too, on the seafloor, yeah.
Yeah, because it's the same thing in the Atlantic Ocean. They have the same magnetic reversals, I believe, But it's the Atlantic Ocean spread is more recent than the Pacific Ocean spread.
Yeah, there's a couple studies, the Chow et al. 2018 and the Ko et al. 1995, where they recorded in the Ko et al. They recorded Steen's Mountain basalt formation in Oregon, which preserved magnetic reversals within a single cooling event. I think it was at 8% or so. No, that's the Chow et al. One. Oh no,
so
the Chow et al. One, they recorded a full magnetic reversal in a less than 200-year span. That was in 2018.
Yeah, and I believe that happened probably both at the time of the flood, or when the waters went back into the ocean and the ocean sank down. I believe it happened then, and then 100 years after the global flood.
Mhm.
I think it also was still happening, or also happened at that time.
But yeah, so anyway, this article it's from The Conversation, which is in like an academic sort of journal kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's written by Chris Fogwell, Alan Hogg, Christian Turney, Zoe Thompson. And basically what they're saying is that the world, so here's what the first paragraph: the world experienced a few centuries of apocalyptic conditions 42,000 years ago, triggered by a reversal of the Earth's magnetic poles combined with changes in the sun's behavior. That's the key finding of our new multidisciplinary study published in Science.
Yeah, I believe that was both the global flood and the 100 years after the global flood was the breakup of the continents. I believe that's what they were observing. I think that's what they're seeing right there.
Yeah, I do too, but I just think it's funny because basically what they're saying is that at a point in the past there was no there was a point where there was no like magnetic field, and they give like this sort of ad hoc story about how Neanderthals and giant animals went extinct and modern humans sought protection in caves from this radiation because the magnetic poles basically protect the Earth from radiation.
Well, but then it existed before as well then, right? Or is just reduced? Yeah.
Well, what they say is that that the magnetic field, it breaks and then it essentially flips, and that's not the polarity, but that's the actual magnetic field breaking down.
Okay, so you're saying that could account for the reduction in age. At the global flood, it was cut in half, and then it was cut in half a second time in the days of Peleg, 100 years after the global flood.
Maybe. I'm not saying that. I'm just showing. I'm just showing. See, I put it in private chat. It's an article from theconversation.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can look at it right now, but
okay, you should. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I don't know if I can.
Here, I'll post it in the comments if anyone else wants to see it.
Yeah, I saw it there, but I don't know if I can click on it without getting kicked off here. But yeah, if I was on my computer, I could look at it. But that fits, to me, it fits in with the known history that we have and the known events that we have.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm getting tired.
That's when I believe the jaguars were separated from the leopard, was at the breakup of the continents 100 years after the global flood. That's
are you going to go, Jackson?
Yeah, I'm going to head out.
Okay. Peace.
Yeah,
See you guys later.
Yeah, I've pretty much been live since, well, when was the debate? 8 o'clock. And I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. So Jackson, Wesley, Jungle Jargon, fantastic discussion.
Yeah,
I had a lot of fun during the after show. So gentlemen, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm gonna call it a night as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. God bless.
Okay. God bless. God bless as well.
All right. God bless. Take it easy.